Welcome to the Planning Board meeting of November 3rd, 2021. I'm Bonnie Sontag, the chair. I will start with a roll call of members. Alden Clark.
Here.
Beth DeLille. Bob Kaup.
Here.
Heather Rogers.
Here.
Rick Tainter.
Here.
MJ Verde.
Here.
Don Walters.
Here.
Thank you. And Bonnie Sontag, yes. I'm going to read through the agenda. We start with a joint public hearing with the Planning Development Committee and Committee of the Whole on an amendment to sections 5D, the table of use regulations, 5E, list of allowable uses, 6A, dimensional controls, and 7B, parking requirements and related provisions to modify definitions and requirements for the permit granting authority for uses 305 country clubs, outdoor health and recreational facilities, and use 406 indoor health and recreational facilities. That's been continued from October 6th. After that, the planning board will open a hearing on Turnpike redevelopment at 166-168 Route 1 for a smart growth plan application. After that, we have a request for a minor modification at 75 Story Avenue. We will be acknowledging correspondence. There's approval of minutes and then other updates. So we will begin with the joint public hearing. And I'd also like to recognize that we have our note taker, Linda Guthrie, with us, zoning administrator, Jennifer Blanchet, and planning director, Andy Port, is here with us, and also the Zoom technical expert. So handing it over to Councillor Shan to open her meeting.
And Chair Sontag, I don't actually see Councillor Shan just yet. I'm wondering if they were trailing from their other meeting. I'm trying to get a hold of her right now just to see if that's the case. While we wait for that to just to get an update on, I assume their connection in just a moment, but I believe that Councilor McCauley may also be joining us, and if not, I'm certainly happy to provide an update on the language changes that were made since the last discussion.
On this,
On the language.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, why don't we just jump right now, unless we're waiting, there is going to be an applicant speaking on the 75 Story Avenue request. Is there a chance we could handle that minor modification right now?
We certainly could, and actually, just so you know, that's pretty quick, I think, but councils are coming, they say, so I'll defer to you.
Right.
I'll defer to you on that.
If they say they're on their way, let's just take a breather for a couple minutes, and then we won't hold them up.
Okay. I believe we have Chair Shan. I think we're still waiting for Councilor Eigenman.
I see we have Elizabeth Delisle, or Beth, for purposes of the minutes, and we have a full contingent.
My apologies, Andy. This was not listed as a joint meeting on the website, so I don't think Councilor McCauley realized this either. Hang on.
Yeah, sorry, I see what you're saying. The in one portion of the page, it's posted or listed as the joint meeting, whereas the other portion we usually have it in as well is not. So I apologize for that confusion, but we'll confirm that internally that that doesn't happen again.
I am messaging Councilor McCauley right now as well. Give us 1 second. And Councilor Eigenman just acknowledged. I think he's joining.
And Councilor Eigenman has joined us. I'm just promoting him to panelist.
Yeah, I'm on now. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was expected.
And Jim is about to join.
Hey, Councilor McCauley. Councilor McCauley, are you with us?
Yeah. Good evening. Apologize for that. I got caught up in this.
No worries. I think deferring to the chairs, but I think there was an expectation perhaps that we could at the beginning give an overview, and I'll defer to you whether you want to do that or you want me to do it, but just updates on where the changes were made since the last meeting.
I do not have it in front of me. I can wing it, but I suggest that you do it.
Okay,
Sure.
before you do that, excuse me, gentlemen, Councilor Shan needs to open her meeting.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, Chair Sontag. All right, so we'll open the joint meeting with the Planning Board. This is the Planning and Development Committee. So this is Chair Shand and Councilor Eigenman. Are you present?
I am. I just want to note, I don't think this was posted.
Not jointly.
If I could, this is Andy. Just to clarify how it was posted. Councilor Shan is correct that usually on the main hyperlink text, there's something that says joint public hearing. Unfortunately, our administrative person didn't include that, but it was posted in the PDF of the Planning Board's agenda as a joint public hearing continued from the last date.
Okay. All right. If everyone feels okay, sure.
All right, so the Planning and Development Committee is here. We have a quorum. I'll turn it back over to Chair Sontag.
And I'm going to follow up on the previous conversation where I believe Councilor McCauley would like Director Port to go over the changes in the amended version dated 10/29. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, thank you, members of the Planning Board and the City Council, Planning Development Committee. What you see on the screen is, and this was posted and distributed, is a markup version of the last version of this ordinance. When you met in committee last time, there were a couple of changes requested. So we've noted the date of the change here. I think the first thing, and again, we'll defer to your discussion and deliberations, but there were some adjustments made to the use table, specifically taking out the SP or permitted special permitted category in a couple of districts and making that NP or not permitted, to make it clear that it would not be allowed in those districts for the changed use and definition from country clubs to outdoor health and recreation facility. So the outdoor health and recreation facility, the sort of newly termed category, would not be allowed in the R1 or a business district or industrial business districts. The next change is on the definition of outdoor health and recreation facility. We tried to, there was language in there before about the enclosed portions of the building or partitions that could be sort of retractable. We tried to better clarify that with additional language. So one, we added specific language about the retractable or mobile enclosure system. And we also included clarity in the language just to make sure there's no dispute whatsoever that the retractable structure itself would still be considered a structure for the purpose of setbacks. We increased the lot size requirement. That was to address a concern that we not allow this use, any more locations than necessary, recognizing the size of the site, one in particular where there was interest discussed at the last meeting, because that site meets a larger size requirement. There was discussion of raising that number, and essentially what we came to was 4.5 acres as the requirement. And then there is, for the lot coverage, there was a concern noted, I think, by the original proponents or requesters of this amendment to have some flexibility on that in light of the enclosed structure that's temporary. And so there's some additional language added in a footnote that the planning board made its discretion owing to the use of the temporary enclosure system, waive that requirement and permit a larger lot coverage as part of the special permit hereunder. So that's similar to the ZBA granting a variance, but it does not require the hardship component. It's really just demonstration that it's not detrimental in the granting of the special permit. So there are other provisions like that in the ordinance. This allows the planning board some latitude to further reduce that percentage. And then the other concern that's reflected in the changes is specific parking requirements. So both with the facility operators, their attorney, and the zoning administrator weigh down this parking requirements. And I know that Councilor McCauley also, I think, had weighed on the particulars of this. So in essence, these changes were made to try to address the concerns that were raised at the last meeting, with the hopes that if these are adequate, then this item could move forward. But again, we defer back to the chairs and to Councilor McCauley.
Are there any comments from the planning board members on this revision? Does it capture everything that we had talked about as far as you're concerned?
Can I ask a question? When was this discussed before? I'm not sure I was at the meeting.
What did we say?
It was
10?
October 6th, maybe.
Yeah,
Right.
October 6th.
Okay, I mean, this may have already been discussed, but why would we not allow an outdoor health facility in the industrial park?
There's been a fair amount of discussion of what uses to allow in the business park. There has been some sensitivity. I'll defer to others who may want to weigh in, but there has been some concern from business park operators about having the more traffic generating uses there that are more, in and out of day-to-day traffic as opposed to their deliveries and things like that. So it seems to me that was maybe a point of concern or conflict there. There is obviously a change of uses on Graff Road that have taken place over time that's migrated that area a little bit. But again, there was some concern there, I think, from the business park in general over the years that I've been here about not migrating too much of those types of uses. The outdoor health and recreation facility being one that could have lots of visitors coming and going, pedestrians and so forth. It essentially, to my understanding, had some concern for them in terms of the type of traffic coming through their streets, complaints that folks might then make about the adjacent businesses that have been well in operation for a while. But others may have thoughts on that side of it from our last discussion.
And the residential 1, 2, and 3, so we're switching it from special permit outdoor from 1 to not permitted, and then, so why would you permit it in R2 but not R3? I just don't understand.
On this, I will defer to the discussions the councilors and planning board members had at the last meeting regarding the R1.
Counselor Igerman, do I remember you being particularly articulate about this?
I wish. I
don't want to put you on the spot. I just thought I
no,
remembered.
no, no. Well, on
really
the
good argument.
industrial one is more easily, Andy covered a lot of that.
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
good with that.
there are two things going on there. I just want to get in for board member Verdi. One is there have been people who have been jogging in the industrial park, and the truckers are always terrified they're going to run them over. So
Sure,
that's a
I
practical-
understand the industrial park. I'm not
Yeah.
as concerned
Okay.
about that.
R1, I think when we discussed it last time, I don't have any R1 in Ward 2, but Councilor McCauley does in his ward. I think the concept was they were thinking of golf courses back in the day. So the R1 is the pale yellow, palest yellow. And I really defer actually to the ward counselors out there. So that's wards 5 and 6 on and a little bit of 4 on whether it's appropriate. But I think what we concluded is that it doesn't actually fit with the suburban style housing they have. I was more focused on R2, which is the majority of our residential area, and I can speak to that. But I'm afraid I'm letting you down. I don't remember where we ended up on R1.
Councilor McCauley, could you weigh in on this particular issue?
Sure. I have a lot of R1 in my territory. We looked at a different map in parcels. There just weren't any there weren't any available parcels to be able to do that. So, as we talk it through, yeah, sure, somebody could buy, 5 or 6 or 10 or 24 homes, but that's not really an appropriate use of.
No, I'm
of
thinking
land.
more of like a small tennis club or something on a smaller scale other than, golf courses, I understand, that's huge, but.
Sure, but when we increase the lot size coverage, we remove just about all of the potential in R1. So it was like one of those, hanging chads that we just took off.
Rick, I see your hand up. Were you going to speak on this or something else?
Generally on this ordinance, yes.
Okay, so before we move on to another part of this ordinance, MJ, does that answer your question or at least give you some perspective on it?
Well, one thing that might help MJ though is indoor versus outdoor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of this too, is that that's kind of make sure we are accounting for those distinctions.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And so this doesn't pertain to any kind of a public park where you could change part of, I don't know, some little park. I'm trying to think of some, what's the one over off of Washington Street into pickleball courts, but that's a public park. So is this only for private, correct?
Right. Yeah. I think we have a different use category for that under
Okay.
institutional, right, Andy?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
That's fine. Move on.
thanks. Rick, you're on.
Okay, this actually is maybe a question for Jennifer. In the list of allowable uses on page 2, where it talks about something that could be enclosed for portions of the year by a retractable or mobile enclosure system, which shall be treated as a structure for the purposes of setback requirements. When I look at the definition of building in our zoning ordinance, it says that a roof, which makes something a building, shall include an awning or any similar covering, whether or not permanent in nature. So it would seem to me that if you had a temporarily enclosed structure, it would automatically be a building, but I may be reading this wrong. So maybe Either Jennifer or somebody else could speak to this.
Jennifer,
I
I
don't,
prefer to- yeah, if you want to speak, go right ahead.
I don't disagree with your interpretation that it would be a building. I think where perhaps the question you're actually asking is, where does that then fall between an indoor facility and an outdoor facility if it's within a building? Is that really what the question is?
No, the question is, do we even need to have this? Because wouldn't a temporarily enclosed structure automatically be subject to yard requirements and coverage because it would be a building?
I
Yes.
think the point was that we didn't want to have any ambiguity whatsoever in this provision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then moving on to the next table down. I raised this concern at our last discussion about not having an open space requirement. And, the R2 district has a 20% maximum lot coverage and a 40% minimum open space requirement. So we've given more flexibility by increasing it from 25% to 30% lot coverage. But I'm somewhat concerned about the lack of an open space requirement. An open pool or a tennis court or a patio is part of open space, but once it gets covered by a temporary roof and becomes a building, as we just discussed, it's no longer open space. So it can't be in the yards. So it would be subject to the front side and rear yard setbacks of 50 feet. But I guess I would just want to raise this concern again. If we're having a neighborhood, and granted, we're talking about, we all know we're talking about a specific parcel, but for the point of view of zoning, we should be thinking about, the general zoning standards. And so I guess I wonder why we don't have any open space requirement. And kind of related to that, I'm concerned about that footnote in. It seems like it's giving us an awful lot of discretion, which we don't give to other lot coverage, other buildings.
Thank you, Rick. This is Andy. If I could speak just briefly to at least one issue, the NA or not applicable for open space requirement. I think that actually originates from the original definition that's being changed here, the original use category that's being changed here. I think Attorney Mead had spoken about this during her comments during the last hearing, but the country club category essentially being replaced and supplanted with outdoor health and recreation facilities. So at the time, it probably made sense to have no open space requirement for a country club, and recognizing what would go on there. But in the case of an outdoor health and recreation facility, it's more likely to be a consolidated building and so forth. It does beg that question, I guess, that we didn't have, I don't recall during the last hearing, a substantive discussion about any threshold that would be appropriate there. And I don't know whether Attorney Mead or anyone else can speak on behalf of the parties involved with the property on Low Street as to any concerns they would have. But I think that the reason why it's that way is just because there wasn't a further discussion about adding a requirement once the country club category is being adjusted to outdoor health and recreation facility. But I think your point is valid, and I guess maybe it's a fair point of discussion to have about should a number be plugged in there, and if so, what is it?
And I guess I would follow that up by saying, since it's a larger lot requirement than for most uses in that district, maybe a lower open space requirement is okay, because a smaller percentage of a bigger number is still a substantial amount of open space. So I guess we just haven't done the analysis, I guess, of what the appropriate number is.
Counselor Ackerman?
Yeah, first, I think on the previous table, you just changed the word structure to building and you're all set, because a building is a subset of a structure. So because it has a roof, I think you do that and you're all done. It's just change structure to building. On this one, if you look at the definition of open space under our code, it's really, I don't know where they copied it from, but some suburb. So they really had in mind residential zones, and it says, open space shall be used for landscape areas and for active and passive recreation, including but not limited to tennis courts. So it's kind of circular here because this is a tennis club. So I can see why it's not worth trying to do an open space requirement. I'm more interested in getting the percentage of lot coverage right. Let's get that right. And I think we're okay. And I don't know that it's right. 30% is I don't know what that comes out to, if that's enough. I guess it would be helpful to know. I think staff may have looked at it. And then the footnote N, I hear what Rick's saying, which is that it's a little vague, the kind of discretion, because it says waive, waive is not reduce. Waive is like zero out. I don't think that's what you meant. I think you meant reduce. But anyway, I think if we focus on the lot coverage, we're there. I wouldn't worry about the open space.
To Councillor Eigenman's comment, I think you're correct. And I think what would make sense is exactly what you suggested for the waive this requirement. It actually should be waive or reduce this requirement. Or if you prefer reduce, just to be clear that is the intent. I think that's actually more consistent with the language we have in the 40R district.
And to clarify, Andy, while you're speaking, where did the 30% lot coverage come from, that number? Was there any analysis or was it finger in the air?
No, I believe actually, and Attorney Mead may be able to speak to this as she did on behalf of her client at the last hearing. I think that's largely where that number had come from, essentially is trying to figure out what would be a maximum that is realistic or feasible in light of what was being discussed there. But again, I think that's probably a question that should be conveyed.
Well, if we discussed it last time and came up with 30, I think we can leave it unless you wanted a further explanation. And Rick has his hand up, so I was going to ask him, do you want that further discussed?
Well, I just wanted to point out that Councillor Eigenman had said he didn't know what that penciled out to. 30% of the minimum lot area is 1.35 acres of building coverage. So it's a pretty substantial amount. I'm not sure that there's any, I don't know that there's any scenario in which we would want to have more coverage than that. And therefore, why would we want to have that footnote, given the fact that we need to have 50 feet of open space all around the perimeter plus parking for the site. So I'm not sure that you can get more than 1.35 acres of building onto that minimum lot area.
I see Attorney Mead's hand is up. Andy?
Thank you, Madam Chairs, plural. May I just offer a few pieces of information related to the lot coverage so that you know that it wasn't a finger in the air?
Thank you.
So I think if I could, Andy, if you could switch over to our presentation, because we did the numbers so you could actually see, because I knew that this was going to be a question that Mr. Tainer had at the last meeting. So Andy, if you could, go to that slide. Thank you. So right now, the lot is 41,280 square feet. It already has 18.9% lot coverage. Excuse me, the lot coverage is 41,280 square feet on the 5.5 acre parcel. That's the size of that building. That's the footprint of the building. So that's already existing. So then just so you could see what that meant by an increase amount of area to get to the 30%, up to 20 is just an additional 2,280 square feet. And 25% is an additional 13,170. And then 30% is an additional 24,260. So what happens is my clients who haven't done a full analysis of the lot said, okay, about what size of pool are we going to have? And then you have to think about potentially what the additional coverage would be around that pool if you put a structure on it, because of course the structure wouldn't be immediately on top of the pool. And then you have locker rooms and, perhaps some amenity building that might have a snack bar in it, or, even an open roof. I mean, a roof with open area, which now, of course, under the new definition is a building and considered against lot coverage, even if it has no sides. So if you go to the next slide, Andy. So what they did was they said, okay, so let's say we had a 108 by 82 foot pool, which actually is, it's quite frankly, it's not that large, but let's say you had that pool, that's 8,856 square feet. Then you have a smaller kiddie pool, and then you have to put the coverage over all of that. So that you have a cover that goes over all of that, then all of that counts against lot coverage. Then you have 1,500 square foot locker room, a 1,500 square foot snack bar, amenities area, and 1,000 square foot storage area. So now in total, you're up to, without considering the total coverage of the temporary cover, just on those numbers alone, you're up to an additional 12,856 square feet. So that puts you right just under the 25%. So the reason we came up with 30% is because if you were to put a cover over any portion of that allowed people not to stand right on the edge of the pool, which of course is what you would have to do, it would really bump up against part of the year, bump up against that 30%. And so I wanted to just show you that wasn't just a finger in the air, but that there was really some thought that went into it to come up with that number.
Thank you. Rick, did you have another question?
Not on this section, on the next page, but that's, if we're done with this, I can go to that.
Any reason not to move on, anybody?
Alden does have his hand up.
Sorry. Alden, are you still on the 30% lot coverage?
Well, I was on the 6A table in general.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if on the use 305, where the district is blank, should that really say R2 there, as that's the only one allowed with special permit in the revised version? Should we specify that in the district column?
This is Andy. Jennifer can speak to that as well, but there isn't a need here because functionally that still operates the same way, but certainly we could do that here. If it changes again, there might be, in this, usually when it's, one requirement for dimensions regardless of district, we do not list, any district there, but as you pointed out, we could just put that in this box now.
Okay, and then similarly for the 406, should there be a row for the R3 district, since that's allowed by special permit and that's not listed in the existing table?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, Rick, with your next comment, please.
This has to do with the parking requirements. And it's just trying to understand what these mean. I'm not sure what the restriction about air-conditioned gross floor area is, as opposed to just gross floor area. If it were heated but not air-conditioned, would this not apply? I guess that's the first question. This is under the parking requirement for both the outdoor and the indoor pieces. So I don't see what the word air conditioned adds, since gross floor area is the area within the building. The second thing is 3 per court, and I assume this means tennis and pickleball, but it could mean basketball too. So I don't know whether just a court by itself is not defined. And then I didn't know what surface pool area meant, as opposed to pool area. I mean, there seems to be extra words in here, and I just don't know. That kind of raises questions for me.
Jennifer has her hand up.
I wanted to speak to two of the points, specifically air conditioned speaks generally to heating and cooling. and ventilating, as opposed to those specific terms. And I believe the reason to differentiate here is we determine, we have lot coverage, which would include, as Attorney Mead pointed out earlier, a area of the site that's covered by a roof and columns, but not necessarily within a building. And so there was that distinction being made. So it's not air conditioning in the layman's terms of it, but in a industry terminology. And then I believe surface pool area was to differentiate, not our terminology, and Attorney Mead, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but that differentiates it from the pool deck.
Yes. So, oh, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. And Jennifer's correct. So these terms came from, I did a significant amount of research. And I think that, Rick, you raise a couple of good points to the air-conditioned area. So for example, I'll give you an example. The tennis club right now has 6 courts, none of which are air-conditioned. And the only air-conditioned area is in fact the locker room area and a waiting area. And there are any number of examples across Massachusetts and the country related to figuring out parking requirements for health facilities, tennis courts, indoor and outdoor tennis courts, which differentiate this air-conditioned area, air-conditioned and heated area versus the overall area. So that's where that came from. Similarly, on the pool area, the surface pool area, it should be, if you'd like to clarify it, it could be surface of the pool area. And that is true. That is to differentiate versus the deck around the pool, but the actual pool itself. Because, and I think that a member of the last meeting we had raised this as a possible way to determine how many parking spaces you could have, because the pool is limited by boards of health on how many people can be in a pool at a certain time, given the pool area itself, the square footage of the pool area itself. And so in fact, there are any number of standards across the country that determine parking for pool areas by the square footage of the actual pool area itself, the surface as opposed to cubic feet. So that's how that came to be. And just to give you an idea of the impact, Andy, if you don't mind going back to my presentation for a second. So currently, the club has 82 parking spaces. And that was based upon, it appears to be based upon gross floor area of the entire club. And if you go to slide 7, Andy. So I want to just go through these images so you can see how much of this parking is actually used. So this is 2001. And next, this is 2005. Next, this is 2000, where'd it go? 2014. Next, 2015. Next, 2017. Next, 2019. And just so we can all cry, I'll show you 2020. Nobody was at the club in 2020. So my point is that they don't use the parking lot to the extent that you would in a typical other building. And so the standards that I found across the country, both from United Land Development Code, the IBC standard, other zoning ordinances in Massachusetts and elsewhere in the country, people do it based upon courts. Because if you think about it, let's take this for an example. The tennis court, at the most, they have 6 people per court if they're running a clinic, plus the professional. So that's 7 people on a court. They have 6 courts. That's 42 people. Most of those people come either together in a car or a family comes in a car. Similarly, for a pool, when you go to a pool, typically people aren't driving individually to a pool. There are families coming to pools. And so the standards are not essentially by each person, but by the size of the pool, because the size of pool limits the number of people that actually can attend the pool. And so that's where those numbers came from. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the one thing Rick was also talking about was the definition of the court. It's pretty clear it's a tennis court, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can say tennis or pickleball. That's fine because they may have some pickleball courts, but that's the point. I don't think we're talking about basketball courts, but we can say that. I mean, I'm happy to clarify that any way the board or committee would like.
That would take care of it, but just those two uses.
I'll speak up for just a second. There is both pickleball and basketball being used at the court, at the Rec Club now. So as of 2020.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, MJ.
No, that's okay. So as of 2020, they started using for basketball, and then they've added pickleball, both indoor and out, and they're using the lower lot for pickleball, and the upper lot does fill up. The lower lot was overflow, and sometimes that is used as well at busy times, but they're rare. I guess that's my point. That the busy times are rare.
Right, they wish they weren't as rare. So we can, I think court, you could say tennis, pickleball, basketball, or similar activity or something like that, if that facility.
Activity, yeah.
Right.
Councilor Eigenman?
Yeah, no, I'm grateful that the applicant's done some research. So I wish we had seen some of the other examples. I mean, because there's two ways you can go here. You can go into this detail where you account for the reality of how many people are using a court for a certain sport, because the number of people using a court for basketball is going to be more than the number of people using it for tennis inherently. So, I mean, if you're going to go that way, you better plan for basketball because it's more people. But I would suggest that we not throw out the idea of just doing a basic square footage. And I do know there are fitness centers and recreational zoning. I'm sure we can find, a million different ways that people have skinned the cat, where they just use a big number and they just say, this many spaces per gross square foot. And then they're averaging, because it's also a lot easier for Jennifer to enforce and apply, rather than, for example, getting, detailed drawings about how much is pool deck versus water, versus what's heated and what isn't heated or air conditioned. So just for simplicity's sake, if we could agree on just a gross number, I think it just might be easier. It's up to you guys what you want to do. You can do it either way, but you have to write this to deal also for the possibility that sports are going to change over time. So I don't think an indoor, tennis club or similar facility is descriptive enough. I mean, if you have basketball tournaments, it's a lot more people than tennis. That's all I'm saying.
Attorney Mead.
So I think Councilor Eigenman raises some good points. I think that the uses and the parking requirements are different for, like, say, a Gold's Gym, right? That's a different use. We have a different use category for that, right? So as an outdoor recreational facility, the numbers are more reduced across the board of the ones that I reviewed. And they use it more on, because of the various types of activities that are outdoors, they really focus on the actual activity itself, tennis courts swimming pools, things like that. So I think that, certainly it's easier to base it upon square footage, but I put the aerial photographs in there to show that it would really have to be refined because, for example, the current requirement just doesn't make sense for the tennis club. I mean, no, they never use that for the indoor tennis club. They never use those parking spaces. It just, you don't want a sea of parking and nothing else. And so was just trying to be more refined. While it may be a little more work, I was trying to be more refined so we didn't have too much parking, which is the balance for sure.
Well, I'll take my hand down, but I mean, I think we're all saying the same thing. I mean, there's no dispute. They're probably overparked, currently, but we're trying to plan ahead. And the problem is there isn't any on-street parking on Low Street. So I'm really just trying to head off a problem later with the neighbors. I don't think anyone's trying to require obscene amounts of parking. I saw my intent. It's just, I think, if this works out for the tennis club, they are going to get heavier attendance because they're going to have a wider range of uses that they don't have right now. And a pool also is there. It's more likely that people are going to want to linger around a pool. I would think with their families but if they're families, they could come in one car. So I'm just trying to identify, I just want to plan ahead. That's all. I don't have a number in mind. Basically it's not as much parking as what they need for the Graf hockey rink, but it's not nothing. I don't know what else to say. I guess we need to turn to staff and why don't we play this out? I mean, it'd be helpful. Maybe we have their plan. So if they built the roughly 9,000 square foot pool, and then we figure out, how much more conditioned area, what does this all come to? And where would we end up?
EMJ's hands up.
Just a quick question. Can they not expand parking on the site that exists? I mean, if they needed to.
Councilor
Seems to
Meade.
me the grading and the additional building space might preclude that. Attorney Meade, could you address that?
Right. I think, the whole site's going to, obviously not the tennis club, but the whole site's going to have to be reworked if they do this, right? So they're going to have to figure out how to do the parking on there. Let me give you, to Councilor Eigenman's point, just real quick. I'm doing, so with using the 1 per 300 square foot of gross pool area and the 1 per 300 square foot of air conditioned area, right? For the new uses, it's 43 spaces. That's rough. So it's 43 additional spaces. And then if you did the calculation for the club itself, there would be 18 plus, hang on a second, 3,000. It would be essentially 18 spaces, 28 spaces for the club itself. So you're at 28 and 43, 61 spaces, if I do my math right. No, 71 spaces. 71 spaces.
And you have how many today? You said you've got more than that
82,
now, right?
82 spaces today. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's helpful to know because, that ballpark, that's about right. I mean, but I guess also when you're at full capacity, I'm sure for their business plan, they figured out, well, when we're at full capacity, we expect to have, 100 people exercising here. That doesn't mean you need 100 spaces because some people can carpool. I'm just trying to head off the problem later. That's all.
Right, but you can't. So here's the interesting thing, right? By courts, you're limited to the amount of people that can be there. Let's talk about the tennis club itself.
Yeah.
You can't have 100 people in there using the courts because there are only 6 courts.
Okay.
Right? So You can't have that. You could, and I don't know what the requirement is for the swimming pool. But the swimming pool is 8,856 square feet. The pool alone would take 30 spaces. So,
Okay.
and again, you have families that come to the pool, right? And then the locker rooms, I added the locker rooms into that square footage because that's air conditioned, same way with the snack bar. So, and I added the storage equipment into all of that. So that's 71 spaces.
Yeah.
But there's only so many people using the pool at one time.
No, I got you. I
Yeah.
think I just had a brainwave. How about instead of doing it by court, because then we're gonna have to think of like every different kind of court sport. I assume the 3 per court is based on, if you have doubles tennis, that's 4 people, right? Or if it's
Yep.
singles tennis, it's 2 people.
Right.
So couldn't we just, figure out that ratio and reduce it to a number of players per court? And that way, if someone does volleyball or basketball or whatever, it's all covered. We don't have to think of every possibility. You follow what I'm saying?
So you want per player per court, like,
Yeah. Wouldn't that be the
One-
way to, I mean, isn't that really what this is about? Because tennis is only 2 or 4 people.
well, we said 6 because that's their
waiting.
most, right? 6 because if they have a clinic, they'll have 6 on
Okay.
a court.
All right. So it's 0.5 per participant.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I don't think that's crazy. I mean, I could get behind that.
I get, this is Andy. I don't know if Jennifer could speak to this, but just Councilor Eigenman's earlier point, coming up with something that's simple for calculations. I don't know if Jennifer would be, because we're not going off of square footage. We're now down to the business operation and how many people they limit to a court to a degree.
It gets a little specific when we start saying exactly, you can only use this court for tennis and you can only use this court for, pickleball. There is definitely merit to, if we can come up with an average that is based on, the square foot average, that is definitely preferable. And it gives ultimate flexibility to the change of use, not use within but change of specific use within this definition of indoor recreation. Or I don't know if that answers your question, Andy, but I hesitate when we start to get as specific as we seem to be getting.
Yeah, I guess that was my concern a little bit, just again, deference to all you folks of what you want to adopt as the parking requirement, but just wanted to try to make sure we're balancing that something that's reasonably calculated doesn't require a whole significant amount of work more than necessary to, which Councilor Eigenman's point, maybe a gross number in some way. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get the applicant out of here tonight. I do. I'm not trying to drag this out, getting near the end of the term and all that. So I would propose either we settle on a, per participant, but 0.5 per court, per participant per court. If Jennifer feels that's really not workable for her, then we know that the average tennis court is what? It's about 3,000 square feet. Roughly. So 3 per court, that means 1 per 1,000. So you could say 1 per 1,000 square feet of court area. You could do that. And then we have to ask ourselves, all right, well, how big is a basketball court? And basketball court is, full size, 90 foot. It's like 4,500 square feet. So that would be what? That would be 5 spaces. So 5 spaces. And that would be about, 10 players. That's 0.5. So it actually works out. So I'll leave it to the group how they want to do it. It'd be easier for Jennifer to do 1 per 1,000 square foot of court area. If that's okay with the applicant and that works with their business plan, maybe that would allow us all to get out of here tonight.
So if I could, Councilor Eigenman, just to be clear, so for the outdoor health and rec and for indoor health and rec, you would do 1 per 1,000 square feet of court area. And then would you also do 1 per 300 square feet of surface of the pool area?
Yeah, I'm no swimmer, so I'm not proposing any change for the pool. That's on the next page, right?
It's on the same thing,
Yeah, I'm not.
same thing.
Yeah, it's right underneath.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking below at indoor. Yeah, I mean, if that's a standard, I have to rely on the applicant. I don't know what a standard is for a pool. I just don't know.
So that's, I saw that repeated, just, you know, repeated in Massachusetts, repeated in the citations that I gave IBC,
Yeah, all right, well, I would suggest if that's okay with the planning board, you know, we can bring that by the time we vote on the floor of the city council. Yeah, just send us a couple examples and then we'll be able to tell them, yeah, this is how they do it in Melrose or whatever.
Okay, so 1 per 1,000 square feet of court area, 1 per 300 square feet of pool area, the court area applicable to both indoor as well as outdoor.
Yeah, I think that works. And I think you're going to end up about where you want to be, which is like
Yeah.
70, 80 parking spaces.
No, I agree. I think that's probably okay.
Good. Let's see if there are any other comments. Anything left on your list, Rick? No. Okay. We haven't had public comment on this, Counselor Shan. We probably should call for that for the record.
Yep, agreed. So for anybody who is looking to make a public comment, please raise your electronic hand and we'll call on you. I see no hands.
Nothing, chairs.
All right, let's bring it back in then. We can close public comment.
All right, are we ready to make a recommendation to approve the revised amendment as amended tonight? Is there any further discussion by anybody?
Can we hear what the changes are that are in the revised amendment?
Let me see if I can do this, and anybody stop me when I'm running on. I believe we agreed to everything in the table of use regulations, the revisions there. So moving on to section 5E, replace the word structure with building. In section 6A, I believe there was an agreement to add the 2 districts, R1 and R3 for use 305. Is that correct, Andy?
That's correct.
Andy, can you
Okay.
pull it back up?
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yep. Hang on, I'm just,
Sorry, yeah,
yeah.
go back. So, no, down. We're going to, yeah, 5E, 6A. Next
Yeah,
page.
yeah.
That discussion, we wanted to add the 2 districts into use 305.
Yeah.
But there's
And just-
only one district.
Isn't
There's only
it
one.
just
Well,
one?
it's one, yeah, the R.
Just the R2.
Yeah, it's
Right.
406. It's
R2,
406 where you have, it's possible by special permit in R3. That's the indoor.
R3 special permit for 406.
Yes,
Got it.
pretty sure.
Okay, I was a little confused on where we came out on that. Clarifying lot area is for 305 is 4.5 acres. I'm still on that table, Andy. And I believe under lot coverage. Oh, it's okay at 30%. We just had a long discussion about how that came to be. Is that correct?
I guess
Yes.
30% seems fine. I guess I was just still concerned about the footnote.
Oh, yeah, let's go to the footnote. That's on the next page.
Yeah, if I could, my recollection was there was discussion of changing at least waive to waive or reduce. But again, maybe Rick was getting at whether or not he as a planning board member has a level of comfort with the discretion you'd have at that point.
Yeah, well, there's 2 parts to that. One is I'm really not comfortable with that because it seems we should be able to get the number right since we know exactly, which parcel we're talking about. And then if we were to keep the footnote, I would actually just simplify it. Yeah, I'm not in support of this, but I would just say the planning board may permit a larger lot coverage as part of the special permit hereunder. Get rid of all that other verbiage. I think it's a question of whether we are comfortable with the number we come up with, or whether we think that we want to change it in a special permit. So my preference would be to say we've got the right number and not give us any special discretion for this. But if we had discretion, I would just say the planning board may permit a larger lot coverage as part of the special permit.
Andy, would you scroll down to the note?
Sorry, you're not seeing that there? As,
Now we see it.
There was a delay. Yeah.
oh, sorry. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I tend to agree with Rick. I mean, let's make sure we have the number right. So 30 is enough, because I thought Attorney Mead was saying, you know, they know it's definitely 25, so they put in a little bit of fudge in there. So we think 30 is good. I mean, really, if we had to make it 35, you know, I could be persuaded if that's a necessity. Otherwise, I agree with Rick. Let's just set a number, you know.
Okay, let's leave it at 30 then, since that's where we were when we talked with the applicant about their example, and take out the note.
And
Agreed.
you know, again, by the time we get to the city council floor, if the tennis club goes back and they say, oh my God, it's 32, I mean, we'll entertain that on the floor.
Great. Okay, but our recommendation will be to leave it at 30 and remove the note. Under parking requirements, Andy, please move down to 7B. Thanks. I have a change of 1 parking space per 1,000 square feet of court area applicable to indoor or outdoor courts, yeah. And I have a change that says 1 per 300 square feet of surface of the pool area itself. You can make that sound more legalese, but that's what we mean, the actual pool area. And those are the only 2 changes after all of that, unless I've missed something in that section. All right, those are the amendments for tonight. So I'll take a motion to recommend to the city council that you adopt this amended version dated 10/29/2021 with amendments made at tonight's meeting. Could I have a motion? Someone make that motion, please.
I will make the motion, Rick.
Thank you. Second.
I can second it, MJ.
Thank you. I'm going to call roll for approving the recommendation. Alden,
Yes.
Beth? Beth, are you there? No. Now, can you speak? Because you're unmuted from this end.
I do know that Beth has been having some technical issues. I don't know if her audio
right,
is
well-
working.
We'll leave her as a abstention then. Bob,
Yes.
thank
Can you
you.
hear me
Heather?
now?
Oh, yes. Do you want to vote?
Okay. Yes, yes,
Yes,
I will vote
okay.
yes. Sorry.
Thank you. We have Bob now. Heather,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
MJ,
Yes.
Don. Is he still with us? I think we've lost him.
Dawn, are you with us?
Oh, there he is. Can you unmute yourself, Don?
I'm here.
Are you
I'm
voting?
here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it was something with the *6. Thank you, Andy. Yes, I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Bonnie, yes. So that's good to go for the city council. Thank you very much, everybody, for that discussion. I'll turn it back over to Councillor Shand.
Counselor Eigenmann, do you want to make a motion?
I'll make the identical motion that just passed the planning board.
And I will second it. So roll call, Counselor Eigenman,
Yes.
Counselor Shan, yes. All right, thank you all. I think we also need to vote to end the public hearing.
So moved.
All right, Counselor Eigenman,
Yes.
Counselor Shan, yes. All right. And motion
Motion to
adjourned.
adjourn. Yep. So moved.
All right, Counselor Eigenman,
Yes.
Counselor Shan, yes. Thank you all. Appreciate
Thanks,
the
Dawn.
work
Thank you.
tonight.
Thank you all very much as well. We appreciate all of your cooperation and help on this.
And thank you to you and your potential applicant for helping us with a lot of the details. Okay, we will move on with the planning board agenda. Public hearing on Turnpike redevelopment, LLC for 166 to 168 Route 1, a smart growth plan application. Let me just say how we're going to go about this tonight, because it's the first time we're going to hear this application. I'd like us to get everything we can that the applicant is ready to present to us at this time, and then use the staff report as our agenda and go through the items as they show up on the staff report for discussion. In between those two, I'm going to call for public comment. So we'll have the presentation from the applicant, then public comment, and then we will go into the discussion with the applicant over the details. The idea being that obviously we're not going to finish this in one hearing, but when they come back, we will have had the overview and we can focus in on the issues that need further review. So with that, I would like the applicant to take over. I believe there's a team of presenters, and take it away, please.
Yep. And Joe, this is Andy. I'm going to promote you to a panelist if you'd like to run through the slides. I don't know if Lou or anyone else from the team wanted to give an introductory comment before you do so. Joe, feel free to pull up the slides. I do have them here, of course, but I think you wanted to flip through them.
Okay.
If you prefer, I can flip through and you can just say next, whatever works.
Yeah, it might be easier for you to do it. I'm having a little bit of trouble getting
Okay.
to share screen.
Yep. No, that's fine. That's what we usually do anyway, so that's fine. And I also have some contextual images to the extent that is helpful for anybody, of the area and whatnot. But these are the slides, and you could just say next for any additional slides you'd like to move to.
Right. Okay. So I'm not actually seeing anything up there yet.
Do other folks see it? The plan set?
No.
No, we do not.
It could be just taking time to open.
Are you able to see that yet? No?
No.
Joe, I'm just going to move you back to the attendees and see if that has anything to do with it.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Can folks see it now?
No.
Oh. Andy, this is Scott Cameron. I was actually having this exact same issue with Zoom yesterday morning with one of my staff members here. And maybe if Joe can share his screen, that's how we solved it. It seemed to be something that just affected one person, not the other.
Okay, I guess we were working fine just a second ago. We can circle back again with Joe if Joe has the slides ready. Joe, are you able to do that if I? Joe, are you able to pull up your slides?
He's muted at the moment.
I'm trying to do that right now. So let me try to.
Yes. Oh,
You
well,
see that?
we see your laptop anyway, or your,
Okay.
we're looking at somebody's email.
Okay.
Okay.
How about that?
Perfect. Go
Okay.
for it. Can you start with your, introduce yourself, and then we'll know who we're listening to.
Yes, thank you, Andy and Ms. Sontag. My name is Joe Sirkovich. I'm one of the architects from Arrow Street, part of the team that's working on this development. Tonight, I'll be presenting the submission that we submitted on the 27th of this month. Joining me will be Scott Cameron from Warren Cameron, as well as Bob Ulig from Halverson, and Lou Minicucci, I think, will also be kicking in some comments as we go along. I just wanted to briefly remind folks where we are on the timeline here. We had an informal pre-application submission meeting at City Hall on September 17th. We got a lot of good feedback and suggestions for our submission at that time, which we've tried to incorporate in the plan that you see in front of us. After that meeting, we also had several meetings with the Planning Department, with the Parks Department, with Sewer and Water, Fire Department, and so on, to incorporate more information into our plan. On October 6th, we submitted the preliminary draft application submission. October 13th was our technical review meeting with the committee. And the plans that you see in front of us now were submitted on October 27th, and this is the actual plan application submission. And we have about 40 slides to go through, so I'll kind of go through these quickly. Let me see if I can get to full screen here. So as you know, the site is 166, 168 Newburyport Turnpike. It's this site here. Just to give a little background, I always like to do a little regional context diagram to show where we are in the overall scheme of things. Our site is located here. We're kind of at the crux of several corridors. The Route 1 corridor, the Clipper City Rail Trail, which passes right up alongside our site. The train terminal from the MBTA is right over here. So there's a number of interesting intersections at our site that are significant and which will play an important role in how we sort of help inform us in our decision-making for the development of this design. We're also kind of at the crux of this retail area, the smart growth district, this industrial zone over here, and then the residential area over here. So there's a lot going on all around us, and we're going to be trying to resolve a lot of different things here. We also think that, you know, since this site is so visible on Route 1, both as you're coming and going, it's kind of a landmark or an anchor to both the smart growth district as well as the Newburyport Crossing community, which is this area in red down here. As you're coming down Route 1 going south, it's kind of an introduction to the smart growth district as well as this neighborhood. And as you're going towards Newburyport, it kind of points the way into the downtown area and is kind of a marker or a gateway building for what's about to happen as you enter the historic district. Zooming in a little bit closer, just to show you that 1 Boston Way is down here, which is built and open. 3 Boston Way is under construction. The train terminal is right here. And we kind of see all 3 of these buildings, our new site and these 2 buildings, as kind of a neighborhood of we know that 3 Boston Way, as Lewis pointed out to us before, will be both LEED certified, Fitwel certified, as well as Passive House certified with all electric appliances. So they're very committed to sustainability and long-term commitment to sustainability. I think we're going to have the same kind of commitment on our site here as well. Let's see. This is the existing conditions of the site. There's 2 lots that total about 2.47 acres. There are 2 buildings, 2 one-story buildings, one here and one here. As I said, the site is bounded by Route 1 with 4 curb cuts that are existing that we plan to reuse. The Clipper City Rail Trail here with a connection through our site, which we plan to enhance as well. And then access along Parker Street, which we plan to use as our major entrance. And then this industrial building to the south. Just a quick overview of the zoning and the program. The Smart Growth 40R district in this area, this is sub-district A, there are limitations of 45 feet maximum in height. We're building up to 35 feet for part of our building and up to 45 feet. Number of stories is 4 max. We're building at 3 and 4 stories. So we're voluntarily reducing the height of the building. Let's see what else. There is a, let's see. We have 78 covered parking spaces, which are in the lower level of the building, 53 uncovered for a total of 131 spaces. 108 are the minimum allowable on this site. We're allowed to build up to 99 units on this site, and we're actually providing a few less than that, 94 total dwelling units. We have 40 bicycle spaces, both above and below ground. And we have a fairly even distribution of studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units. And with about 25% affordable units. Existing conditions photos. Here's an aerial view of the site, which is here, showing the Haleys and this industrial building. The connection to the rail trail, which is here. This rail trail continues to the train station in 1 Boston Way, which is right across Parker Street. And then some existing shots of the property. Looking towards Newburyport Center and looking away from Newburyport Center here. This is a site that shows the first kind of pass at our site plan for the site. What we have here is 1 building that stretches across the entire site. It's a very challenging site, as you can see from the shape of the outline of the site. Much of it is very challenging to build on, like these pieces around the edges. When we first started this process, the design, we looked at a number of different buildings. We looked at a single building at 4 stories. We looked at 2 buildings at 4 stories separated by a gap in between. We looked at L-shaped buildings. And we feel that this one, the current layout that we have, offers the most benefits to both residents and the town, as well as urbanistically. It is both 4 stories on the south, 3 stories on the north. So it steps down as you get closer to the rail trail. We thought that was kind of an important gesture to make. It follows the bend of the Newburyport Turnpike. And then on the Clipper City Rail Trail, it opens up much more and makes a gesture toward the rest of the community at 1 and 3 Boston Way. So 3 stories here, 4 stories here. The reason it steps up is because there's more activity in the in the SGD commercial area along here, the Smart Growth District. By stepping the building down, it really does significantly reduce the overall bulk and massing of the building. And that was kind of our primary goal in doing that. We had to take out about 5 units on this side of the building in order to do that. But I think it was well worth it in terms of the composition of the building and the organization of the layout and the massing. In the center, in the link between these two buildings, we kind of consolidated all the amenities from the ground floor all the way up through the roof. So when we were looking at two building schemes, we had two lobbies. We had to provide access points to both buildings, and we were eating up a lot of outdoor area. This just helped us consolidate most of that and really make it more efficient, provided much more opportunities for open space and connectivity for the bike trail. So that's a very brief, let's see, overview. I'm going to switch it over to Scott Cameron now, who will talk about a few of the site plans, the parking, the characteristics thereof. So Scott, if you want to take it over from here.
Thanks, Joe, and good evening, everyone. For the record, my name is Scott Cameron with the Moore and Cameron Group, civil engineers and land surveyors. We're based at 66 Elm Street in Danvers, Massachusetts. And thank you for having us tonight. I'll try not to duplicate points that Joe already made in his opening presentation. I'll keep this more on the engineering technical side. But one thing he did mention was the challenges associated with this site, and not necessarily even with the lot shape, which is very irregular, but also topographically trying to balance some of the zoning district goals of creating and defining frontages, building frontages along the lot lines, the frontages, which in this case are both the Clipper City Rail Trail and Route 1, and also Parker Street to an extent, although that's more of an access point. But as we were going through the development of the site design, of course, we always start looking at existing conditions and what we're dealing with on the ground. So we conducted an instrument survey of the entire property, and we actually had the benefit having surveyed 1 Boston Way and Parker Street on those projects before this, merging and blending that survey together to get a composition of both the surface topography and the utilities that are found beneath the surface of the land. So when we completed the existing condition survey, notably the industrial building is kind of sitting right in the middle of the total tract of 2.47 acres. Haley's building is situated a little south of that. Thank you, Joe. And the majority of that portion of the property is paved or building. So it's a highly impervious finish to the site, fairly consistent with the development when these buildings were constructed at the time. Little consideration to stormwater management. In fact, there is none. There's no closed drainage at all on the property, treatment, or any of the measures we're accustomed to in today's standards of development. And portions of the property are shedding stormwater directly to Route 1. The majority of the property is shedding water towards the Clipper City Rail Trail tract. And more or less along the lot line between the two properties, we identified what is likely the remains or remnants of the original railroad drainage ditch. Construction of railroads back when these were built in the 1800s was construct a very level train bed, of course, and then on the shoulders it would drop down into a ditch, and that's where water would collect. As you can imagine, they're very flat. And over time, without maintenance, these ditches kind of fill in and with organic material and debris and leaves that break down, and eventually they grow in, which is what you see today, which is kind of a scrubby, mix of different type of understory and tree canopies. But water does still kind of sit and drain and eventually gets down towards Parker Street. And at that point, right at the intersection of Parker Street, this was an area we spent a great deal of time studying when we were designing the 1 Boston Way development, because there are some, not only water from this property, the rail trail, some offsite properties, portions of Route 1, all of this kind of converges here at an old railroad culvert. It's a stone culvert, and this goes under Parker Street, and it's at that point where we kind of lose it. There are no records on file eventually, during the due diligence of the design and then construction, we determined that this water did eventually flow down through 1 Boston Way, through Boston Way itself, the road, and eventually out further to the south, and ways down, ending up in the Little River, several thousand feet away. But what we did as part of 1 Boston Way is Minco reconstructed the culvert on the south side of Parker Street with brand new pipe drainage structures and also a treatment system at great expense to ensure that that water was properly draining to where it needed to be and receiving the current standard for stormwater treatment. And again, that was not only for the development of that property, but also for a lot of the public and private property surrounding it. So we had the benefit of knowing what was going on here with a lot of detail. Since that work was done, I haven't observed the flooding and backup that used to occur at that intersection. That culvert itself was fully obstructed. It was not able to drain. The pipe was actually buried where it was originally daylighting. Since we've done that, the water now passes freely. I was out there during several storms a few years ago and found the water level backed up and at the level of Parker Street. And had heard reports of it getting to Parker Street itself, but that problem has been alleviated. So that, as we look at developing this site and the integration between the development parcel and the rail trail, we're able to take a good look at restoring what once was and making sure that everything is going to work properly from a stormwater perspective. We did also conduct test holes on the property. The majority of the property is actually deep sand, coarse sand with no water table observed. It does transition into the more typical clay and silt that we find throughout most of the industrial park. Right around the existing pedestrian connection to the rail trail, which cuts across. Maybe Joe could highlight that. Right about that area. So it switches north of that. It's all sand, and south of that, it's your typical silt and clay. So the great thing about that is it gives us more flexibility with stormwater management and the building design, where we're not worried about groundwater table as much as we are in other parts of the development. Joe, if you could switch to the next slide, please. This is a demolition and site preparation plan. This will be a key plan that will get further developed at the construction phase, working with contractors, the town under the stormwater permit and EPA stormwater permit provisions that apply in construction. But notably, I wanted to identify in this plan, we did outline the limit of work for the property, which is going to more or less follow the lot line, except for the portions where, again, we're starting to blend the development site together with the rail trail parcel. And you will see a little bit of overlap, which I'll go into in the subsequent plans. But as far as erosion controls, this property would be subject to the EPA Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan provisions under their construction general permit. So the site would be registered. There's a fairly extensive monitoring obligation under that with all your erosion controls, silt fences, mulch socks, construction entrances, dewatering measures and whatnot that are fairly commonplace today, and most everybody is used to implementing these plans. Moving forward into the site plan, I'll start going through some of the site design constraints. We're balancing here a lot of different factors horizontally, and these really play into the lot shape. Joe and his team working, with Mako did an excellent job crafting and shaping the building to fit the property in the shape. And in the design of the site that's going to support this, our primary objective obviously is access to the property. That main access point where we expect to have the property address is on Parker Street, and that would be a 24-foot wide conventional driveway opening 2 lanes. Along it, we did put some bends to break it up so it doesn't look like a long straight kind of runway feel. That gave Bob and his team an opportunity to landscape that and treat it. So from the street line, you'll see a lot of parking fenestration, I guess, as you look down that aisle. There are 4 parking spaces at the street, 1 handicapped, and a proposed sidewalk connection, handicap accessible sidewalk connection back to the rail trail. Then moving further down, you have additional parking for tenants. When you reach the building, kind of the primary frontage of the building, there's a turnaround that was designed in a teardrop design. You will see that there's a walkway marked out, kind of crisscrossing, and a solid waste disposal area there. While it's showing those fenestrations, that's all flush construction. So we are differentiating the walkway paths from the driving aisles using material changes, which Bob will get into in a little bit in his presentation. But the idea here is that we are enabling the Newburyport fire truck to be able to safely turn around without having to do a 3-point turn in that turnaround area. Of course, right there, we have a reconstructed connection back out to the Clipper City Rail Trail. And that connection's key as it continues out. This is, you can stand out there at any point in time. There's a lot of people that do walk and bike and walk their dogs and use that cut through back out to Route 1, and constructing a dedicated 6-foot wide walkway back out to Route 1. And at about the end of the property line, there is an existing concrete sidewalk and a lighted crosswalk that goes over Route 1 up towards Hill Street in that neighborhood. We will have to be working a little bit with Mass DOT to complete that connection, as the shoulder is relatively narrow there. But we're confident we can get that done. Right now, it's just kind of a beaten dirt path that people clearly use with frequency. So that connection is going to create a safe, accessible route directly out to the rail trail coming through the site. Moving, I guess, going from that south end of the building, there is a parking area and an access off of Route 1. We have intention of this to be a fire access route and also kind of your delivery vehicle. So your mail, postage boxes, there is a loading zone for short-term loading, and then an aisle out to the end of the property. And this was designed to accommodate, again, the Newburyport fire truck, who they want to be able to have access to all sides of the building, at least 3 sides of it anyways. And that's what this area accomplishes. And then the north end of the building, another parking area. Again, this would be one way with the pull-off, is designed to fully meet the requirements for the fire truck for emergency vehicle access. We also providing parking here that would be assigned to the tenants. And that will be a key thing as we look at, how people know where to go. Tenant parking will be assigned, so they'll know where they go. They'll park there every night. And that will minimize, people going to the wrong spot searching for parking spaces. This northerly parking area will also be parking multi-purpose during the daytime for a commercial space that will be built on the end of the building on the ground floor level. So your commercial parking will be there for that, and appropriate signage to direct people to that. And of course, another connection to the rail trail to get people using the rail trail, handicap accessible path back to that commercial space. The sidewalk continues back around the frontage of Route 1. We are providing connection points for live-work units in that area directly out to that walkway. So there's basically 360 access around the building for pedestrians, utilizing on the rail trail side, the rail trail itself, where it didn't seem prudent to design a parallel sidewalk on the site. There is a pool built in to the design. I won't get into that too much. And there's handicap parking and another loading space in front of the building, and that is your main door right there. I wanted to, while we're on this plan also includes the schedule of lot coverages. So you can look at existing versus proposed open space. You can see we list out the waivers. There are a few waivers we're requesting for the project, which ultimately we feel helps us achieve a better project. I'm going to save those probably for the end, maybe in discussion with the board. Our parking lot landscaping calculation, parking notes, everything appears in this plan. Joe, could you switch to the next, please? So in addition to the horizontal challenges from the lot shape and trying to make this fit, we are also faced with vertical challenges, which we can't lose sight of. Where we have a district that is pushing and promoting for 0 lot line setbacks or close to 0 lot line setbacks. It creates situations where we need to kind of get the grade even or level around most of the property and still be able to blend and work with existing grades. So there is some grade change across the property. Along Route 1, the frontage goes from about elevation 31 at the south end to about 35 at the very north end. More along the building and the curb cuts, you're kind of between 32 and 34. On the rail trail side, you're down around elevation 30 to 31. The rail trail is very flat. And then in the drainage channel going down towards Parker Street, that culvert's actually all the way down at elevation 20 down at Parker Street, which is the low point of the site. So it's about a 14 to 15 foot grade change from the northerly end to the southerly end on Parker Street. And we're trying to make all these grades work, also make sure that stormwater management, we're not going to have flooding, ponding, or other issues with it. And what we did with this is we held mainly the Route 1 frontage because of the proximity of the highway. We don't want the buildings sitting, the first floor sitting below the highway for sure, even though it would have been easier with the grading on the rail trail side to sink that down. It's not very pleasant when you're a foot, 2 feet, 3 feet below grade, right at headlight level for the highway. It creates other challenges there. It's also not as aesthetically pleasing to have a building below the road. So we did hold that. It sits about a foot above the highway at the highest point along the building. And we worked that back along the frontage. It's all relatively flat, elevation 34, 30, 33 along most of the building and the parking areas there. When we go to the other side on the rail trail side, we're contended with the swale. And that's really the challenge here because the rail trail comes back up to elevation 31, but the swale ranges from, some areas that have filled in around 30 to down to 26, 25. So we have to try and make that work. So the grading scheme here, it does appear, I guess in plan that it goes further into the rail property than it actually does. But the idea here is we are matching the grade along the rail trail for almost the entire stretch. But we are restoring that drainage ditch that I mentioned earlier in my presentation and make sure that that will continue to function and be maintainable in the future. So it would be mobile, or if it is a turf finish or with the landscaping, it can be finished and manicured so that weeds and growth and leaves can come back in 10, 15, 20 years and shut it down again. So the idea on that lot line and all the grading there is intended to get that to work again. With the new pedestrian connections back out to the rail trail, we are going to need to kind of bridge that. I'm using the term bridge loosely. It's just going to be filled with a level walkway and probably head walls on each side or short walls on each side, 2 or 3 feet, so that we can run a pipe underneath the walkway, have a level handicap accessible access point across the site. And that's really the extent of the filling there, simply get the pedestrian access safely out to the rail trail. The grades along the industrial property are matched. We are not changing the grade on the industrial property on the corner of Parker and Hill Street. And then from a stormwater management perspective, again, we had very good soils throughout most of the building portion of the property. And what we're going to do, because we didn't have a very large increase in paved surface, it was actually a decrease in the pavement area, a lot of hardscaping and sidewalks and walkways and pools, plus the building. So what we're going to do is we're going to plumb the building so that the entirety of the building will drain into an underground infiltration basin that will be made of concrete tanks. And these tanks are going to be placed in this sand I was mentioning to allow for that building runoff, that roof runoff, which is clean. It's not dealing with the pollutants that we find in parking areas that come off of cars. That clean water will go back into the ground in that sand media through this system. And that's at the northerly end of the property in that square grid. I also want to mention that, we wouldn't want the building right on Route 1 anyways, but there is a Mass DOT easement along the frontage. We do have the building moved up as close as we can get to Route 1. But from a constructability and also just the fact that there is an easement there, we can't put that building right along the frontage. And the shape of the building, or the shape of the property rather, and some of the grading and access are really driving its position and interface with the rail trail. So I feel we did a really good job through a lot of iterations, fitting and adjusting the size of this building to fit the property. The next plan, I'll just be brief. But the key thing with the utility connections moving along, we intend to bring all the utilities, water, sewer, stormwater back out to Parker Street. Working with the fire department, we did include the provision for 3 hydrants on site. So we would run a main up the Parker Street driveway. It would run along the south end of the building and then run along Route 1 to provide a hydrant at the northerly parking area, in front of the main entrance, in the middle of the building on the Route 1 side, and then in front of the entrance of the building on the Parker Street side. And then there's another hydrant existing on Parker Street, almost across from the site. It's at the Business Park driveway. Newburyport Business Park driveway is another hydrant. So this hydrants, they're all within 500 feet, which is the subdivision spacing requirement for the hydrant and a hookup point for the trucks on all sides of the property of the building. And then I talked a little bit about the drainage. The hole in the ground where everything kind of floods now into that culvert. What we're proposing to do there is continue the upgrade work that was started on Route 1 and continue it here. So presently under the existing driveway, there's an old corrugated metal pipe. It has reached the end of its useful life cycle. They only last about 40 years. It is rusted. It will probably fail completely within the next 5 to 10 years based on the age of it. So that pipe will be replaced. That pipe collects runoff from the adjacent industrial property and portions of Hill Street, Parker Street, and Route 1. We would install a new oversized manhole where there's currently just a big hole in the ground. That manhole would receive this pipe. That manhole would receive the runoff from the development through a new closed drainage system. And it would also receive the runoff from the rail trail drainage swale and collect that in an area where we can maintain it. We don't have to worry about it getting blocked by obstructions and debris, trash, leaves, whatever. And it gets this water underground, so it's not causing, it's maintainable in the future. So that upgrade at the intersection for the closed drainage will benefit both the property itself to comply with stormwater, but also the rail trail and public and private properties around the area. I think that'll conclude my presentation on the civil perspective. I am in receipt of Phil Christensen's first review of the project. We did just get that the other day. So we intend to go through that in detail. And I have had brief preliminary conversations with John Eric White from the Newburyport Engineering Department as well. John Eric came out to visit us when we did our soil testing. So from a technical, we do expect to go through the typical process with the third-party review and address Mr. Christensen's and Mr. White's comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And now we'll hear from Bob Ulick from Halverson Landscape.
Thank you all for taking the time to listen to the presentation. To kind of try to be brief and not cover the same territory. Just wanted to start by highlighting again this main edge that interfaces with the Clipper City Rail Trail that is essentially the low point along the entire site. And we've given a lot of attention to this interface based upon kind of our perspective on it and also the site walks that we've had with the city. The majority of that existing vegetation, as well as the debris, is located essentially to either side of that property line. And the majority of the existing plants that exist along there today, when you walk along the rail trail, when you see that expanse, is essentially the majority of it's all on the development site, with very few exceptions. And based upon the discussion that we had with the city, we've tried to focus on some of these areas, such as the north end of the site. There is one large oak tree beyond the parking lot that's between Route 1 and kind of the property line on the development site. And there's like 2 or 3 other oak trees that are adjacent to the parking lot there. And we've made efforts to pull any level of disturbance back from that. We've redesigned the parking lot so it's south of the large oak tree. We've pushed this retaining wall, and it's going to be a mortarless block retaining wall, kind of 8 or so feet to the east of the property line to minimize any impacts on the tree roots along that edge, because we prioritize this mature grove of oak tree as something that would be hard to replicate on that end of the site. In the middle of the site, and then to the south end of the site, most of the trees are composed of non-native volunteer invasive species such as poplar. And there's a variety of invasives such as oriental bittersweet that have taken over and taken hold both in the ground level and grown up into the trees there. And this has occurred somewhat, as Scott said, through the history of time and lack of disturbance and lack of maintenance in those areas. And so we're proposing to protect the mature oaks at the north end, protect some of the drifts of sumac that the planning office pointed out to us they thought they wanted to maintain, and Parks Department did close to Parker Street. And then generally in the rest of the area, we're going to clear and grub and regrade a lot of these other areas in between to create, this helps in two regards. One, Scott talked about it, the swale in its kind of current form is rather unsightly. We're hoping to make a more smooth transition that we think, benefit the development site, but it also benefit kind of the aesthetics of the rail trails. So we're going to regrade that transition. At one point they had between the turnaround area at the main entrance and where that kind of the alchemy garden is, we had to have a wall there because of the grade transition. But when we looked at doing a bit of regrading onto the site, we were able to eliminate that wall and again, make it a smoother transition given the grade changes across there. And so again, we're going to regrade and we're looking to create a more seamless transition across the property line and replant with a lush vegetated planted buffer along the entire length, composed of a blend of deciduous and evergreen trees, shrubs, and understory plantings. You can see that, we've tried to not have it just as like a straight line so that it doesn't just like as a hedgerow. But in talking with the city, they thought it was a good idea for us to, be allowed to do some supplemental plantings on the Clipper City Rail Trail of that property line, as well as on our property to avoid that kind of straight line hedge kind of approach to it. So we've done that. In addition, as mentioned, we were encouraged by the city to think about not just maintaining and recreating the existing connection to the rail trail to Hill Street, but we've added a new one adjacent to the north end of the building that will help supplement access to the site, to and from the site, as well as be an invitation to the commercial retail that's anticipated for the northwest corner there, adjacent to the rail trail. The intent is that we widened out those two connections and made enhancements to the connections from the rail trail to the site to be 8 feet wide. And then once they're within the site, given the restrictions, we've enlarged the sidewalks from 5 feet, but they're essentially 6 feet within the site. Then working our way up along, I talked a bit about the edge there, then working our way along Route 1. We've introduced kind of on our side of the Route 1 right away on the development side, some ornamental scale trees. There's overhead power lines in that area. So we've gone to more of an ornamental scale tree along that edge to create both a buffer and an attractive edge. We pulled the sidewalk back from along Route 1, both to be a buffer for pedestrians with the high speed of traffic running along there, as well as just not to have it right up against the sidewalk, a green edge. So we're planning on planting, continuously along the turnpike, along those areas. In addition, we've done planting around the parking area at the kind of south end of the building. And then as you come back towards the turnaround area, if you would, Joe, at the main entrance off of Parker Street, we're looking at what is a fairly broad area of pavement in order to accommodate both fire emergency vehicle access, as well as access from residents from Parker Street into the garage, in and out of the garage, and then for the drop-off area. We're looking at introducing unit paving as a perimeter band around the edge of the circle, as well as the center of the circle, to reduce the overall appearance and create a better aesthetic for that area. In addition, we're looking at doing, again, the different unit pavers at the edge of the circle area and where the waste management is, so that when the pedestrian path crosses that area, it again feels like it's a more pedestrian friendly zone. Doesn't feel like the pedestrian is crossing in the midst of a sea of asphalt. As mentioned, we've created also connections from the front entry for egress to the pool area. And I think that's one area where we've also got a wall, just given the grade change between the pool area and the rail trail along that stretch there. I also wanted to note, in conversations with the planning office, you'll note that there's some kind of colored plantings that are on the west side of the rail trail. We were encouraged to provide some supplemental plantings because there's kind of gaps in kind of the cedars and other, tree plantings along there to provide more of a buffer between the experience on the rail trail and where the woodworking shop is along that stretch. So we've done that as well. I think, and then the only other thing I would want to make mention of is, as Joe mentioned, there's bike parking down in the lower level of the parking below. And then we've also got parking accommodations right near the front entry there off of Parker Street, and bike accommodations over near where the commercial retail is on the north end of the site. And then if you want to just go to the lighting plan for a moment. And so we've developed a lighting plan. Again, what I think the thing you'll be most familiar with is we're using the same, both as a thread of tying all the Boston Crossing projects together. We're using the same fixtures, both parking and pedestrian scale fixtures on this site as were on the previous sites. Both are cut off, both use warm LEDs. So it's a comfortable feeling light. It's not cold and off-putting. And all the lights are cut off so that we keep the light down and on the site versus spreading light pollution elsewhere. I think that generally covers the highlights, Joe.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So this is Joe Sirkovich again, and I'll just go through a few slides about how we organized our building. Again, as I mentioned, we have a 4-story building on the south and a 3-story building on the north, 42 units here, 52 units on this side, and then both of these buildings are linked by kind of an amenity, vertical amenity space that includes the lobby, access to the grade level pool, a second floor outdoor deck, a co-working space, a lounge, and then an upper story, 4th floor amenity space that also includes an outdoor deck. So we really tried to take advantage and maximize the space that was available in this gap between the two buildings by creating those spaces that can help to reinforce the community between these two buildings. And also they sort of gesture out towards 1 and 3 Boston Way to reinforce that community connection in the overall neighborhood of the Newburyport Crossing complex. Amenities that are not available in 1 and 3 Boston Way will be shared by those residents here, like places like the pool and this upper level deck. So that'll also help to reinforce that connection, pedestrians and residents moving back and forth along the bike path to use this space, and getting in touch with other residents in the neighborhood. A view from the Newburyport Turnpike side. The small retail component is down here highlighted in red. And this also shows how we're trying to reinforce that curve of the turnpike, and to set back some of these buildings so that they read more like separate buildings, setting them back several feet here. And then by doing this, you also get that wide open expanse that faces the Clipper City Rail Trail. It's much more open on the back side. It's kind of a different feeling on the back than it is on this side. And then just some of the highlights of the ground floor plan when it's integrated with the landscape. As Bob had mentioned and Scott already, access to the Clipper City Rail Trail is an important component because it's such a link to the neighborhood as well as to the rest of Newburyport, and even spaces beyond like Maudsley State Park and Plum Island, and the trails to the south. So we really see this as a real focus for our project, the neighborhood, and contextually as well. The main entrance, the pool, there's a gym that faces the pool. At the main lobby, we have a package delivery, a mail room, an open stair with a small atrium that goes to the second floor, leasing offices, and then a secondary smaller lobby on this side here for drop-offs and pickups. The retail component is down on this edge, and the north parking lot south parking lot, short-term drop-off and 12-foot wide access drive. And then the access to the below-grade parking is down here. Trying to get back one level. So this plan just shows an overview of the 4 levels of residential as well as the underground parking level. As I said, we have 94 units distributed sort of evenly across 3 floors and 4 floors. We have 24 affordable units, and there's some live work units on the ground floor that face the turnpike side, which I'll get to in a second. Bike parking down in the basement, and the ramp that takes you down to the parking level. That's the parking level. It's about 11 feet below grade. Bicycle storage in 3 locations. The main lobby, dog wash area. Each parking space also has a storage locker at the end, similar to what was designed at 1 Boston Way. On the ground floor, the main lobby again. The live work units are these 2-bedroom units here. There's 4 of them. There's one here with direct access out to the sidewalk. Another one here. 2 more here. Typically, our 3-bedroom units are on the corners. And you'll see an even distribution of affordable units across all floors. The structure on this ground floor will be designed so that if in the future there's a retail or a commercial component that would like to come in here and take a few spaces, we'll be able to open those spaces up wider than the normal unit to accommodate just about any size of retail component. The second floor, this sort of also shows how both buildings are starting to step back to reinforce a 4-story building here, a 3-story building here with a gap in between them. As you view this building from the Newburyport Turnpike, you'll see that recess and hopefully read it as 2 separate buildings. They're also treated differently in terms of the architecture on the exterior, which we'll get into in a minute. There's a 2nd floor outdoor deck off of this lounge and co-working space that also has a stair that connects down to the pool level. We have balconies that face the Clipper City Rail Trail side. And on the Turnpike side, we have Juliet balconies in many of these units. The 3rd floor, lounge space with an open stair that connects up to the 4th floor amenity space. So on each one of these floors, there's a lounge space, which helps to reinforce that community among all the residents. And then the 4th floor with the lounge, open stair, and an outdoor deck. On the roof, we are making accommodations for solar power as we did on as Lou did on the other 2 projects. So the location and placement will depend on the mechanical systems and the vents that will be distributed up here. So we're planning on some area about this size, whether it's along the edges or over here, will depend on where the condenser units and the vents are eventually laid out. In terms of the building massing and how we try to organize the building, we just had a lot of different inspirational images that we liked. Buildings that have setbacks as you get higher, that use different materials like brick. And this one has metal, but we're not really using a whole lot of metal. bay windows that project out, ground floors that are treated a little bit differently than what's happening above to reinforce that commercial zone. Different types of windows, some that jog back and forth to create variety and texture and depth. We like kind of what's going on here. Different colors and textures. We really like the wood tones that we saw in some of these buildings. Balconies, and again, setbacks, landscaping at the base. So these are all the kinds of images that we looked at when we were trying to deal with the mass of our building and how we could treat it on both the Route 1 side and the Clipper City Rail Trail side. In terms of materials, we're looking at brick in some areas with things like soldier coursing, modern detailing with crisp edges, Juliet balconies, coursing articulation, different types of brick or different colors of brick on one building versus the other. Wood tone materials that could be either real wood in the lower building or fiber cement panels that simulate wood, such as this Hardy Plank product. Nichiha was very successfully used in one Boston way. We're planning on reusing it here as well. And, wood tone products that look like wood, sort of like Trespa panels, and Plank Flex, I think, is another one that we're looking at. So those are some of the materials that we were looking at. We did put together a box of samples and sent it to the planning department last week. These are the samples that were sent out. Some of these we're not planning on using. We like the warmer tones better. The brick with the iron spot, we like real wood that's treated with steam and compression so that it's impervious to insects. We are also thinking about using some of those, but just a combination of brick, wood, and wood tone fiber cement products is kind of what we're planning for the two buildings. This is a sort of a 3D view looking towards the Clipper City Rail Trail and showing how some of those materials we plan to use on both the 3-story building, which we see as some brick and some wood siding like material. The retail area could be Nichiha panels and glass storefront to make it sort of stand out, contrast against the residential building. You see the pool here with the connection to the upper level deck. We want the main entrance to be very open and welcoming with a lot of light coming out. So we're looking at open storefront, a lot of glass here, as well as in the amenity area to try to separate these two buildings, providing a lot of fenestration and views out toward the rail trail and back towards 1 and 3 Boston Way. On the taller building, we're also looking to use brick, but primarily at the ground level, all the way around. And then those wood tone products, warm and slightly cooler ones, to provide some contrast and variety throughout the building. We're also trying to treat the upper level of the building, the roof line, with different parapet heights in order to provide even further breaking down of each building so that there's not one long roof line. We're doing that both the front and the back of the building. This is the Route 1 side. You can see the bay windows that we've tried to incorporate, the retail area, the amenity link in the center, and then breaking up that roof line on both of the buildings. And then reinforcing that whole curve as you go along Route 1. The elevations, 3-story building with the brick and the wood look material. The main entrance is over here, the amenity link, and then the 4-story building. Balconies on the rail trail side and Juliet balconies on the turnpike side. And we tried to, use different colors and textures to really make these two buildings play off of each other and work well together. The north and south elevations showing the retail component up against the 3-story residential area, and then the southern building. A section through the 3-story building showing the parking level below grade. The first floor, which has a higher floor-to-floor height to provide better opportunities for retail and commercial space. I think it's 12 feet here, floor to floor, and 10'8" and 11'6" as we go up. The upper roof deck, you can see the second level deck, the stairs spilling down to the pool, some buffer here, and then the rail trail all the way out. The Newburyport Turnpike is over on this end. And then we have a few renderings just to highlight some of the things I just spoke about. This is an overall view that shows kind of the connection. Again, the bend in the building, opening up toward the rail trail, looking back down, trying to make that connection with the rest of the neighborhood. The big turnaround, the pedestrian connection through Hill Street, which will cross here and then come across like this. That's the existing connection to the rail trail, and then the other one is down a little bit further. Opportunities for solar panels on the roof being shown. And then a view looking southbound on Route 1, showing a band at the ground floor to help define that potential retail zone. Some setbacks at the 3rd floor to even more help diminish the bulk of the building with a balcony there, a small retail component, and then these bay windows. The 3-story building kind of ends here, and then the 4-story building picks up here with the link you can see kind of peeking up over the edge. The landscaping and the buffer elements here, building sign. A view on Route 1 looking northbound. We will have some better definition of the live-work units, which are here, 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 here. Those will have these canopies similar to what was used on 1 Boston Way, canopy frames to help define the entrances to those units. Those are not shown here yet, but they will be in 4 locations. And again, that band across the base to help define that retail commercial zone. Breaking up the roof line a little bit with angles and higher parapets so that it doesn't read quite as long. Same over here. And then the setback of the buildings to help define that gap between the two of them. The view from the Parker Street entrance, which shows the 4-story building and some of the patterning that we're using on the windows. All these windows will be operable. I don't think some of them are not shown as being operable, but they'll be casement or awning windows. Balconies on this side. All the windows and sliding glass doors obviously will be insulated, and we're also looking at what sort of sound mitigation we can get in those windows, especially on the north, on the other side that faces Route 1. We're looking at a variety of window types, maybe even the ones that are going to be used on 3 Boston Way, because those are quite soundproof and highly efficient. The entrance down to the parking garage is here, the turnaround, the main lobby entrance, and then the rail trail over here. 2nd floor deck, and then the roof deck in the distance. And here we're looking at using, again, brick and wood look materials on the upper portions. A view of the entrance. Since it was raining so much last week, we thought we'd include a rainy shot. What it looks like when it dries out. A view of the 3-story building with the pool in the foreground and a short wall that's there to protect everyone. It's directly accessible from the gymnasium, which is down on the first floor, balconies, and then these setbacks that again help to try to break up the length of the building. A view from the rail trail toward the retail area and the 3-story side on the north. A little parking area here, access to the retail, the pool in the background, and then this wood look material complemented by the brick and then the setback at the 3rd floor. And lastly, just a little close-up of that earlier image we saw showing the entrance, the turnaround, and the whole way we're trying to connect back to the rail trail and break up the building into 2 pieces with that link and the entrance, pool, and the turnaround area. So that's the bulk of our presentation. Those are all the slides. Andy, do you want to, or anyone, Bonnie, do you want to take it back now?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, both to you and Scott and Bob. I know everybody's eager to get going on the details, but so that I don't forget it, and it is an important part of our review, I'd like to call on public comment at this point. If there is anybody who would like to comment, please state your name, your address, and let us hear from you. Andy, can you let anybody speak who raises their hand?
And first person we have is, it's just shown as Tarantino. Perhaps you could identify yourself for the record. And person identified as Tarantino, you will have to identify yourself. You have to unmute on your end as well by pressing the unmute button that should appear on the bottom left of your screen. Not seeing a response there. Hopefully you can figure out how to unmute yourself on your end. We do have a Donna Tarantino, and perhaps that's the same person with 2 devices. I'm not sure.
Just say yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
Donna.
sorry. Go right ahead. I just muted one of your devices. Hopefully you can do it without any echo.
Yeah, okay. This is Ken Santiano from Haley's. I just want to say that Mr. Mancuso has been a fantastic landlord to me.
Mr. Tarantino, I'm sorry, if you could just mute one of the devices in your room that is causing some audio feedback.
Can you hear me now?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to say that Mr. Mancuso has been a fantastic landlord to me for the past 3 years. And, you know, he's talked to me before he went for the permits and stuff. And I'm looking to retire. The business has gone way down with the epidemic and stuff. And it's not feasible for us to stay here. But I just want to know what a great guy he is and a fantastic landlord. And you couldn't ask for anybody better. And that's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Is there anybody else?
I see no other hands at this time, Chair.
Fine, we'll close the public comment portion and go back to discussion with the applicant using the staff report as our guide. I'm just want to note in passing that we approved at our last meeting the application submittal waivers, but we will expect to be discussing them at a later date. The signage plan and details, CAD files, proposed exterior lighting plan with photometric information, drainage report, and stormwater management report with drainage calcs and proposed operation and maintenance plan. So moving into the topics for discussion tonight, the first category is dimensional waivers that have been requested. There's one, the first one has to do with maximum front yard setback that equals 10 feet. A waiver is requested to increase this to 16 feet to accommodate an existing slope easement and to maintain a consistent building line along Route 1. I'm going to take these individually. If any planning board member would like to comment on one of these as we go through, please just jump in. And so I'll take anybody who wants to comment on this front yard setback request for a waiver to increase it to 16 feet. Any comments from anybody? Because if we don't have any comments on it, I'm going to assume that's going to be one that we will put on the list for approval. Okay, we'll move to the second one. Maximum footprint area allowed equals 10,000 square feet and 22,000 square feet within 250 feet of the commuter rail trail and the rail trail and the Clipper City Rail Trail. Oh, I'm sorry, the commuter rail station and the Clipper City Rail Trail. 32,000 square feet building footprint is requested. This is a sizable waiver request, but an argument can be made that given the unusual lot shape and narrowness of available land and the need to have a viable 40R project within this narrow angular corner of the district, a larger, more flexible building footprint is necessary. Anyone want to comment on that?
I'd be happy to comment on that, Chair.
Sure.
First of all, I want to compliment the team on a very thorough presentation, and there's a lot of good ideas here. There's a lot of thoughtful information about materials and details, but this is a very challenging site in terms of configuration, in terms of its frontage on Route 1, and this just feels like there is a little bit too much that you're trying to make happen on a site, and part of it has to do with the size of the building footprint and the lot coverage issue. You've made very strong points, and I may get off subject here a little bit, Chair, but there's a couple of things that kind of relate to the building footprint. The team made very strong points about the smart growth district, the connection to the train, connection to other residential projects that are either built or planned. But the site isn't really organized in a way that really reinforces that or takes advantage of that. All of the pedestrians will be on the Parker Street side of this site. They will all be between this building and the train station, moving in that direction. I don't understand how the retail will work at the northern end of the site. I think circulation would be helped tremendously if you connected the main entrance over towards Route 1. And that has to do with the size of the building footprint. So there are a lot of issues here that need to be resolved. There are 4 curb cuts on Route 1, on the curve in Route 1, which I think is not the greatest situation. So I fundamentally I have a problem with the lot coverage waiver, but because there is such a significant footprint for this building, it creates all kinds of other issues that I think really need to be talked about in detail before this project should move forward.
Okay, Rick?
So just regarding that one point, that's all I have to say for the moment. But
All right, let's take other comments related to this footprint issue that may bleed into other issues as yours have done. That's fine. Rick?
So I would echo a lot of what Bob said. I would put it almost, put it stronger. I would say that pretty much all the issues that I have with the site plan have to do with the size of the footprint. It crowds out, you're squeezing in so many different places. It's creating little corners on the north side, on the south side. It's squeezing the pedestrian connection and so forth. So there's a lot of difficulties with that. I have to assume that when we adopted the smart growth district and said 22,000, is that what it is, 22,000 square feet next to the rail trail, that was because we analyzed all the lots and figured out what the appropriate footprint would be. So I think that a 45% increase over the maximum footprint size is a really big chunk. You know, we raised this at our September meeting, and I don't even think the building has changed much since then. So I think that that's a point that we made pretty strongly. I think that the building has to get smaller. I mean, that's I think a no-brainer at this point. Just looking at all the issues we're going to be dealing with in terms of vehicular circulation, pedestrian and bicycle circulation, which hasn't been addressed at all. There's been talk about pedestrians, but no talk about bicycle circulation. Safety of parking movement in these small lots, and the list could go on. So I have some serious issues with not the idea of a waiver, but the idea of a waiver of 10,000 square feet.
But when you say that you have serious problems with the size of the building, you're still referring now just to the footprint.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's all I'm referring to. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Others on this particular issue? Anyone else want to comment on it? Okay. That what both of you are referring to, of course, is major design considerations for the entire project. So I don't know if I think we ought to hear back from at least Joe on this.
Yeah.
Or you want to think about it before you want to respond, but just sort of your initial reaction to get started on this.
Right. So as I stated, when I started, we did look at a number of different schemes when we were first designing this, including a 2-building scheme, which had 2 buildings at around 13 to 14,000 square feet. Each of those would require their own lobby, and there would be a gap in the middle. Both buildings would be at 4 stories, maximizing the height at 45 feet. We looked at that and we saw really no benefit for a 2-building scheme in such a tight lot where the lobbies would be so difficult to access. That's why we consolidated the lobbies and the amenity spaces in that space in between, and then voluntarily dropped the height of the northerly building to 35 feet to compensate for that, because it's the right thing to do urbanistically. We went back and looked at a 2-building scheme after we had our initial discussion with you on September 17th, and we still feel that we're making the right move now, both for the residents and for the town. I don't think there is a benefit to have 2 buildings, both at 45 feet on this site. I think we totally agree with the 22,000 square foot limit. It's a good one, but I think it really has to be looked at site by site to see what the constraints are on some of these different sites. If you look at this site, you can tell right away that it's just so narrow that it would be difficult to accommodate 2 lobbies and access for fire trucks and provide amenities for them to meet that 99 unit maximum on this site. So we think that this is the right solution. We thought long and hard about it. We think that composing these buildings as they are composed, one against the other, is the right way to deal with it urbanistically as well as for the community.
Chair, I wonder if I could just make a comment relative to that. When we're talking about urban design, and again, there's a broader context here related to the smart growth district. For me, urban design starts with the ground plane and the connection of uses and reinforcing pedestrian circulation, making simple, legible vehicular circulation. I'll be very honest with you, on this particular site, in this location on Route 1, the height of the building is not at the top of my list in terms of urban design considerations. And when lowering the height of the building at the north end creates a larger footprint and squeezes those urban design issues at the ground plane, and creates difficult circulation, unclear connections, then I think you've got to step back and take a look at that again. I think there's a lot of things that aren't working at the ground plane here that really need to be looked at again in terms of how this building functions, how vehicular circulation works, and how all of this connects to the broader smart growth district.
Any other response to what Bob has said? Because I agree with you as well. I'm not worried at all about 45 feet across the whole structure if we could work out a much better layout and circulation, everything he said. So I was heading in that direction. He just got there first to say it. So I'll just reinforce it. Thank you.
But urban design is also putting retail, if retail is part of the program, putting retail where the people are. And if all of the pedestrians are moving between this project and the train station and connecting in that direction, that's where I would want to put retail. The very small piece of retail at the north end of the building, which is served really only by the rail trail and by cars pulling into the parking lot, doesn't seem viable. I would think you would want it in a place where it had, maximum pedestrian connection. So, there are things like that I think you really need to think about.
Did somebody else want to speak?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. This is Alden. I guess my concern, I'm not concerned about the height of the building either. And I think having a smaller footprint would enable a little more setback from Route 1. It seems very, very crowded towards Route 1, which is not really an urban space where you have buildings right adjacent with the sidewalk and the road. It seems a little tight on that side to me, in addition to the other comments made.
I'm going to move on to just try to cover, we may circle back on this, but let me just go through the other waivers. The third one is about the minimum 60% of the front building facade must be at the front line. A waiver is requested to allow no facade at the front line on Route 1, which speaks to Alden's comment right now, due to the existing slope easement and lot geometry. A new pedestrian sidewalk will be constructed, as we know, along there. So that just, I guess, reinforces what Alden was saying. I'm going to move on to the next one. This waiver is for a minimum width of sidewalk is 5 feet. A waiver is requested to allow a minimum of 4 at the southeast building corner. I heard sidewalks of 5 and 6 feet. Where's this minimum of 4 feet and why? Could you speak to that, Joe, please?
Yeah, I believe that is, there's a pinch point right over here where the sidewalk is a little bit tight. So we had to reduce it down to 4 feet, just in this one small area.
Okay, that seems relatively minor in the bigger scheme of things right now. And that could change if the design changes. So we'll move on to the next waiver. Oh, Rick, sorry. I'm seeing you. Yep, go ahead.
So on this thing, we're looking at things in little silos here, and I understand that, but this is a function of, again, a function of the design, and it's a function of the building footprint. And one thing, a theme that goes through a lot of this is talking about pedestrian connections, when one of the things that we strongly asked for, and said it was going to be something we told them we were going to be asking for, was a bicycle and pedestrian connection from the rail trail to Hill Street. And this particular plan, and it's hard to talk about that waiver in isolation, but this particular plan takes that bicycle and pedestrian connection, turns it into a pedestrian connection, makes pedestrians cross 3 driveways instead of the plan that we looked at earlier, one of the images in this presentation actually shows a direct shot along the property line to Hill Street. So there are inconsistent pictures in this presentation. But I think, again, this relates directly to building footprint, and it also relates to not talking about what we asked for when we met previously about paying attention to pedestrians and bicyclists, which this plan doesn't do.
Okay, good. To connect that. But we do have to get through all these waiver lists, so I'm glad you're bringing in the bigger picture as we go along for everybody. The last waiver is a request to use a Cape Cod style bituminous berm or no curbing in certain areas. That's what's required. Bituminous berm or no curb is requested along the perimeter edges of the parking area to accommodate low impact stormwater management measures and snow push areas. Be any problem with that, just in principle? Okay, so we'll leave that one as it is. Dimensional and parking requirements. Let's just go through this list as efficiently as we can. The proposed project meets the dimensional and parking requirements in the following ways. It's a whole list there. I'm assuming everybody's read this. Where are you on this list? Anything you want to point out that you think is insufficient, too much?
Scott, are you still on?
Bonnie, I just wanted to say that it says residential density requirements are 40 units per acre. That's the maximum that they can get as of right. And again, the program is pushing this. So, if it could be, 80 units, we might be a lot happier. I think that we shouldn't say that it's mandated that they have 94 units.
Yeah, that's the maximum is what you're pointing out, but they don't have to meet that.
Right, it's not a requirement. It's not a density requirement. It's a density maximum.
Right. Which fits into the bigger picture we've been talking about, potential redesign. But the numbers as they are listed here don't raise any red flags for anybody. That's a question.
I would just say relative to the parking that is below grade within the building, that it's it's a dead end system. So it needs to be parking that is dedicated to individual units, which I'm sure is what is contemplated. Access in and out is tough. That's a tough turn to make with two-way traffic. So, I think there's a little bit of thought that needs to go into that as well, so that significant portion of the parking is functioning properly.
Okay, thank you. Heather?
On the parking, I have a few questions. One is, when I'm reading it, it feels like the parking is being associated to residential units. I'm wondering that one commercial / retail at the end, is there a different parking that's associated to that, or that would limit some businesses based on the number of parking spaces that are there? And also on the live work units, which I'm not that familiar with, I'm wondering if they were converted, as it seemed like he was saying they could easily be converted. Would that change the parking there if those were to become retail? Would they become a different ratio than they are to the live work? And one more question on parking is, are there any additional concerns with parking closer to Parker Street to be used by people finding out about this and using the rail trail and occupying some of these spaces that are actually allocated for this building?
All very relevant questions. Could one of the members of the team respond to our questions?
This is Scott. I can talk to that. So during my presentation, I talked a little bit about the flex spaces. So residents are typically going to be here in the evening hours. Of course, more here during the day working from home. But regardless, the zoning minimum for parking for this is 109 spaces. We are providing 131 spaces, which meets more of the current market demand. During the daytime, when those spaces are empty on the northerly lot, they would be all available to the commercial tenant. And we had talked about the 4 spaces near Parker Street being left open during the daytime hours, potentially for some rail trail parking there as well.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
So I can't see the north parking lot working unless residents are required to leave during the day. It just doesn't, how, if somebody pulls in, how are you going to lease the space to a tenant who can't be assured that there will be people who aren't staying home all day or leaving their second car there or something like that? So I guess I would think, and then this a related question is, the live work spaces don't make any sense at all unless they have parking in that north lot. This is not a pedestrian, having live work spaces face Route 1 is not bringing somebody from downtown to walk there. So it's, I guess it's not a question about the parking spaces, it's a question of the management of the parking spaces. And it would seem to me that north lot just can't be residential parking.
Good question. Okay, we'll leave that with the applicant team. Anything else on the dimensional and parking requirements section? Heather, your hand's still up. You probably want to take it down, or I'll forget and keep calling on you. Thanks. The next section is on proposed parking lot landscaping. Any comments on the landscaping plan, just as well as the parking, related to parking? Sorry.
Phil Christensen noted that the item E is not correct. That there are 2 places at least where there are more than 10 spaces without a landscaped island.
Well, they did talk about that they were going to be responding to him, so they'll be checking that out, but it's good to point it out. Thank you.
I just had one question about the turnaround, and I wasn't sure the main turnaround near the entry, why there are no plantings. Was that because of the fire trucks in the middle there?
Bob, are you still here?
I can probably speak to that as well. This is the turnaround area, why there's no plantings
Mhm.
around that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. So we need to make sure that the truck isn't feeling claustrophobic as it's turning. There's an overhang. So we typically try to keep any vertical obstructions away from that area, bollards, plantings. So there can be some low-lying cover, but nothing really up over, 12 to 18 inches would be desirable in that area.
Yeah, it just looks like it needs to be softened a little bit, that's all.
Would that be, MJ, like in the center of it?
Yeah. It's just a big open asphalt.
It's, I guess, to the extent that it isn't all asphalt, it is unit pavers will be used to distinguish between the different surface textures. So that the turnaround actually is not asphalt, only the parking spaces and leading up to it.
Right. No, I understand that. I was just mean.
Whoops, you just.
Sorry, my internet connections are really bad. I'm moving around the house. I just meant hard surface, sorry.
The idea is to soften that a little bit. Okay.
It's a minor point.
We're trying to capture everything now so we can not have to come back to it at a later time and wish we'd done it earlier or gotten it out there earlier. So this is good. Should we move on to requirements for affordable housing? So those are met. The numbers here are obviously in relationship to the total number of units now. So if they were reduced, then the number of affordable housing units based on 25% would probably decrease. But that we'll deal with when the time comes, if it comes. There is a request for a submission waiver that we should vote on tonight for an affordable housing marketing plan. Andy, I'd like to ask your advice on this. Those are usually submitted before final occupancy or first occupancy in a large project of this nature. What would be the appropriate deadline for that?
Sorry, say that again for the.
For a submission of affirmative housing marketing plan, where they're asking for a waiver. We're going to vote on this tonight, and I just want to know it should be submitted by what deadline?
Yeah, so we would want that prior to the approval. But technically what we did in the case of One Boston Way, if I'm not mistaken, is we made it a condition that prior to the occupancy or prior to the approval, but we extended that to allow prior to the occupancy in the building. So I think that prior to the occupancy in the building is what makes sense here, because they have a fair amount of back and forth, even those templates that are used for this, fair amount of back and forth with the state. So just to allow some latitude for that time frame to play out, we thought it would make sense to have, I think, as a condition of the approval, that be finalized and on record prior to the first occupancy.
Okay, so there's a difference between our seeing the submission for the plan and then when the plan is actually approved. I guess I confused those two. So this is a waiver request for submittal. Do we want to just leave it open and say, if we're in agreement with that, you have a submittal waiver, but it must be submitted before we make our decision?
Yeah, exactly. So submission of the draft prior to approval, right? But on record, essentially finalized and on record prior to the occupancy of the building.
Okay, so those are two different things, but submission prior to approval for the waiver. All right. Anything else on affordable housing you want to talk about right now?
From my end?
No, anybody, I'm sorry, rest of the
Oh,
planning
sorry.
board. Sorry, we're back to everybody else. That's my general type of request. Okay, we'll move on to, well, I don't know. Yeah, let's talk about design and materials and all of that, just to give the applicant a sense of where we're coming from on what we've seen. I'm just going to take them open-ended. Anything you want to say about massing scale, height proportions, exterior style, entries, materials, energy efficiency? Let's just go for it.
Bonnie, before we do that, I just want to have a question for clarification. So we're going through this list, but at some point we'll be going through the plans themselves and focusing in on details?
We can focus on them at any point you want to, if you want to have something brought up.
I didn't know whether we wanted to, I didn't know whether we wanted to be looking at the plans, the plan details, or just looking at these categories of information.
I'm trying to keep it general now, because if we go into a lot of detail at this point, it may become not only overwhelming, but it may become irrelevant.
That's what I wanted to clarify. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to comment on the plans, but I'm happy to go through this process and then.
Yeah, let's stay at this level. When we get through this, I'll ask the applicant team what more they want from us tonight, in terms of the response that they feel they need to make to what we've said. And then we'll go from there. So let's keep it, I guess it's relatively high level at this point. But right now I'd like architectural input from others than, I mean, more than just our architect and our designer on the planning board, but anybody can speak up at any time. You want to kick it off, Bob?
Sure. I mean, I think relative to everything that was shown in terms of the palette of materials, in terms of the effort to break down scale, I mean, those are all, for me, the right direction to be thinking in. So I think in terms of, what is resulting here and what we're seeing in the images in terms of the character of the building, the quality of materials, I don't have any negative comments about that. I think that's the right direction to be going in. And it's a good architectural firm working on this project. They've got a long track record of very good work in Boston and elsewhere, and I have utmost confidence that they can execute this at a level of quality that we all expect. So I think what's been shown so far is a step in that direction.
Does anyone else want to comment on this topic?
Yeah, I agree with Bob on that, and I think it's the attempts to break up the surface and the different materials and the different heights and different indentations of the surface, I think is the right thing.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, Beth.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know how to have fewer.
Beth, I think you may have two devices on. We see you twice. Can you turn one of them off?
Yes, I can. Except that then I won't be able to hear anything. I have some technical issues today. So
if you just mute the audio on one of them temporarily, it should address the echo.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there's just a background. As long as you're not repeating, it'll be all right. Go ahead.
Yeah. I agree with what's been said. While I appreciate the distinction in the materials in the two buildings, I would like to see them tied together a little bit more. I wonder if the material treatment is a little too distinct. I also feel that while there's so much detail in the front, there should be a little more on the Route 1 side too. I feel like that side looks neglected a bit if there was reference to it being a gateway and what you see when you come into town and into this area. So I think I would like to see a little more attention paid to the Route 1 side as well.
Okay, great, thanks. Heather.
I was very pleased when I saw the materials in person, and I like the way they look in this rendition. I agree with what everyone's saying, with the exception of if you were to make this a smaller scale lengthwise and you brought up the third level to a fourth level, I think that what is depicted here is more pleasing. I don't know what the answer is to make it a smaller footprint and to get all these units in. But I feel like if it was all that 4 levels, it would just look too big of a structure, and it would be more challenging design-wise to get it to look like these multiple buildings the way they look now. I do like the way this looks to scale better.
I agree with Heather. This is Joe Sirkovich.
Yeah, well, that is going to be the trade-off, absolutely. Let's see, any other planning board members want to speak to the broad issues around architecture?
I guess I just have one comment, and it's nothing aesthetic, it's more of a function, is I really am just concerned for the units that are on the higher south side of the building on Route 1 and the amount of glazing on those living rooms. That just seems really exposed. And I love the idea of the sliders, but they're going to, I imagine, have blinds or something in front of them most of the time, just because of the exposure. The soundproofing, I think, can be handled with the glass, the door and window selection. But I think the visual part of it to me is just a little bothersome, but not sure it could be done.
Okay. I'm a little concerned about the, maybe there's a conflict between the equipment that hasn't been identified yet and how it's going to be screened on the roof and the solar panels. And I would like some more consideration about that, and maybe too early in the project to ask for that from the team. But it looks to me like it can't all go up there. Any other comments from the board members before I ask the team to respond?
Yep, Bonnie, this is Don, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to raise my hand when I'm on the phone. So
go for it.
We understand, or I understand, that the applicant must conform to the stretch code. My question to the applicant is, have you done a study to determine the incremental cost and or life cycle savings for taking this building, either making it a net zero building or decreasing the energy use per square foot by 50%? Hopefully the question is understood by someone on the applicant side. Again, that's my only new comment. A lot of the other comments I agree with, but I'm not going to be repetitive. Thank you, Don.
Great. Okay, good time to turn it over to the design team to respond specifically to Don and to some of the other comments that were made, if you have an answer.
We have not done an energy study yet at this point, but we plan to do one as we solidify the design and know exactly what we're designing to. So that will be forthcoming.
Thank you. Anything else about our other comments on architecture at this time?
Well, I heard someone, I think it was Mr. Trainer, mention 80 units. I'm just wondering how he came up with that number, 80 60, 85? What, how are we supposed to respond at this moment in terms of the layout? I'm just curious.
That was not a proposal for 80 units. It was basically saying that your program aiming at 94 units is what's creating a lot of the difficulty. So I don't think that's you're not required to provide 94 units, except that that's your desire to do it, to maximize the site, and that's very understandable. But because this is an oddly shaped site, I just don't think it's reasonable to expect that. Well, I think you need to design the building to the site rather than to the number of units.
Ah. Anything else from the design team at this point? I also see Lou's hand up. Is that meant to be responded to? I mean, you're welcome to speak, whoever's there, if it's Lou or someone else. Or is it not meant to be raised?
I've been having some problems getting online. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we are.
Oh, thank you. And first of all, thank you for all your time this evening. I know it's been a long night. In terms of the number of units, I think I'm hearing Mr. Tainter say that he's not really trying to tie us down to any number of units, but he's looking to ensure that the site works and functions in terms of circulation. And we're trying to do that and balance that as well. The site can accommodate 99 units. We've reduced it to 94 in an attempt to try to make the site work. But I've heard a lot of the comments this evening, and I do understand what needs to drive the project is something that circulates better than what's currently circulating. And if that can be done with 99 units, fine. And if it needs to be less than 94, so that's what I'm hearing is coming from the board. I do want to say that I really am very committed to energy efficiency. I think that you'll see in One Boston Way, we are LEED certified and Fitwel certified. In 3 Boston Way, we're LEED Gold certified, passive house. We're shooting for passive house as well as Fitwel. So in terms of fulfilling sustainability issues, we're committed to doing that. I can tell you, however, that pricing within the last couple of years, even since we started One Boston Way, has accelerated significantly. There's significant supply chain issues, material issues, labor shortages, and pricing on nearly every aspect of this project continues to go up very quickly, and much more than we could have ever even fathomed when we did our initial financial models. Fortunately for us, the interest rates have come down to offset a little bit of those cost increases. But if you're following the news, it looks like interest rates will be climbing maybe in the second quarter of next year. It's really hard to say. But when you layer on additional costs for energy conservation, as much as we're committed to doing it, passive house and LEED certification, using the highest quality materials that we can use, and I think that was evident in One Boston Way, and we're using the same material for 3 Boston Way. We're committed to all of those factors, but then trying to make it financially feasible at the end of the day, there's a certain number of units that we need to have to make it work, to balance it. And the other thing that I think is important here, traditionally the 40R districts in most communities throughout the state require has a guideline of 20% of the units set aside as affordable. We're doing 25% here in Newburyport, not only on this project, but 1 Boston Way and 3 Boston Way. So right now we'll have a total of 64 units, of 64 affordable units if all 3 phases, so the 3rd phase is ultimately approved. And you'll have 254 units that will be counted towards your housing inventory, which hopefully will give the city future control on its I guess, growth of residential housing. So we're committed to using the highest quality materials. We're concerned about sustainability and energy conservation, and we want to make our projects livable. 1 Boston Way, I think we were very fortunate in leasing up all 76 units in the first month. And that's because we have, I think, a high-end building. It's attractive. And we're going to essentially adopt all of those same characteristics in this building. But I have to have the balance of cost and affordability. And the marketplace is really working against us with supply shortages and high escalating labor costs. I don't think I answered any of the architectural questions.
Don't worry about it. That's great. We do require in the smart growth district 25% affordable. So that is the requirement here. You know that.
I know you do. Typically in a 40R district, it's 20%, and Newburyport adopted 25%. All that means to say it makes it even more challenging to make a project financially feasible.
Right. And I don't know where it fits in, but I know there are rebates and discounts and all sorts of things related to making energy efficiency more affordable. And I know you can take advantage of those, but I'm not going to talk details right now. I trust you on your pro forma. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, we've looked. Mass Save is the agency that you'd go through for the rebates, and it comes to about $3,000 a unit to do the passive house and the LEED certification. You may be looking at between $35,000 and $40,000 a unit, and your rebates are $3,000 odd a unit. So.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to move on to the design standards, just to make sure we haven't left anything out. We may have hit some, no, I'm not sure we have. We're talking about sidewalks and location of building and garage entrances. I know that was touched on. And vehicular access is going to be looked at by the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee. And so we can leave that and get feedback from that meeting afterward. But any comments you want to make, board members, at this point on this very long list at 10:05 of site design standards that you feel the applicant should consider at this point, looking at this again at a rather high level? I know they would appreciate it. So whatever you'd like to say at this moment about these that we haven't covered, please chime in. Do I see any hands or hear any voices?
I guess just quickly, I would say at a high level in terms of the site, there's really 2 fundamentally different sides to this building. One faces Route 1 and is fundamentally an automobile and vehicular environment. And I really don't know that there will be a lot of pedestrian activity on that side of the building. And I think the site plan and the landscape plan should maybe acknowledge that. I've said this before this evening. I think fundamentally it's the south side of the building that is potentially the pedestrian environment. That's where there should be hardscape. That's where there could be units that are more like live work units, because that's where you are relating to the public. So I think the plan needs to kind of recognize those realities about the site. So that's just at a very high level. It doesn't get into a lot of detail, but I think fundamentally that there are very different environments on each side of this building.
I would agree with that, and particularly the issue of the live work units and commercial space really should be. We talked about that again back in September about how this should be oriented toward toward what I think is the front of the building, which is the Parker Street access to the building. It's hard to see how people will circulate to the live work units on the Route 1 side of the building. It does seem as though, and again, it's the nature of the site and the nature of the size of the footprint, that the parking layout is very disjointed and hard to imagine how you would provide effective wayfinding to get people to the right parking lot. And related to that, the south parking lot really seems to be potentially a real source of danger for cars backing out of parking spaces, conflicting with the exit driveway, for pedestrians and bicyclists crossing two driveways. There needs to be a lot of work done there, and giving more room to other than vehicles.
Okay. All right. We've probably given the design team a lot to think about, and could call it quits at this point for tonight. There will be comments coming in on this design anyway from other stuff. Actually, I see that they're here, but there's more work to be done. And I know the design team has been reviewing them, including the very detailed comments from our project manager, Jordy Vining, relating to the rail trail. And I'm not going to go through those at this point, but I know you've been reviewing them because you've actually referred to them in some of your presentation. I want to wrap it up. I want to vote on the submission, the waiver for submittal of the affirmative housing plan, marketing plan right now. And I want to agree with you when you want to come back for a date to continue this to. Is there anything else on the design team side that you'd like us to discuss at this point?
No.
Okay, so let me have a motion first of all to approve the submittal requirement at this time for the affordable housing. I think it's called the Affordable Housing Marketing Plan. This is just a submittal waiver like we did at the last meeting. Do I have that motion?
Bonnie, Bonnie,
Yeah.
this is Lou Minicucci again. If I apologize for interrupting.
Yeah.
The housing plan that we were talking about will probably be identical to that of 1 Boston Way, which took over a year and a half to negotiate with DHCD. So the only difference will be the location of the units that takes a lot of scrutiny by DHCD once again. And that's really hard to do at this point until the plan gets absolutely finalized. So I think there's some comfort on your end to know that the language is all been worked out. We're operating with an approved plan by DHCD now, and it'll be essentially the same plan, which is locations of units and to be identified.
Well, that's also good news for you because we're just talking about the submission of a draft plan to us to know that it's in the works. But to actually have it approved, what we talked about earlier, you may have missed that part of the conversation. We talked about with Andy was the idea, was the condition in the decision, which would be when that actual plan has to be recorded. And we'll talk about that when the time comes. But at this moment, we're just allowing you to submit the draft plan at a later date and not tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I could, Bonnie.
Yeah, Andy, go.
So, yeah, if I could, Bonnie, just to clarify to Lou, Lou, I think you may recall this, but I think on 1 Boston Way, we had the original condition might have been prior to building permit. And I think what we did was extended that to occupancy, recognizing the time frame you had with DHC to get that wrapped up because it took such a long time.
Right.
So I think that's what we're really talking about here is that prior to occupancy, while you do have a draft that the board needs to have, even if it's consistent with 1 Boston Way, that you'd have to have that finalized with DHCD and recorded, of course, to cover all eligibility of the units prior to the occupancy.
Right. True. Okay, I understand that. And the plan will be, the plan's going to be identical too, other than the dates, but I'm okay with that.
Great. Okay, so let me have thank you very much. Let me have a motion to approve this waiver for submission tonight.
So I would make the motion to waive the submission requirement to simply require the draft affirmative housing marketing plan to be submitted prior to our decision with the final plan prior to occupancy.
I wouldn't put the second part in there yet.
Okay, that's fine.
Just because it's the submittal waiver. I want to keep it clean. And can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Whoops.
Right.
Fight it out. Who wants it?
Either.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Alden.
Okay, I'll
Got
second.
Alden on that. Let me call roll. Alden,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
MJ,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
and Bonnie, yes. So that's done. Our idea was to give you plenty of time to come back with responses to our comments tonight and other work that may be done for December 15th. Does that work for the design team?
Yes, I believe it does.
That's great. So I'll take a motion to continue this application to December 15th.
Actually, I have a question of the applicant. In saying that would work for them, will they be able to address Phil Christensen's concerns, including the plan requirements?
Scott, are you still on the line?
I am here, of course. I think this, the way I look at this, the comments, a great deal of them are highly technical in nature and have little to do with the site layout and configuration. We would address certainly anything that would affect that and answer any questions or concerns that may have been misread or not part of what he had at the time he reviewed that. I guess I feel we have some things in flux right now that are going to involve a lot of engineering work. So it wouldn't be very prudent of me to go through answer all these questions, which may or may not apply when we come back to you on the 15th.
Right, so Scott, isn't it essentially the same thing? Until we have a site plan that's nailed down, you really can't start digging into what you have to do.
Yes.
Is that so if this all gets shifted essentially to December 15th, and we do come to a meeting of the minds with the planning board on a site plan, then you would be able to start digging into the work that you need to address for Phil Christensen.
Correct.
Yeah.
So back to my other question, do you want to stick with the December 15th date? I don't know how much work this involves for the design team. And if you can do it sooner, that's fine with us, but we're trying to give you as much time as you need.
Yeah, I don't think we'd be able to do it sooner. There's a fair amount of work here, and we'd want to look at options, and we'd have to run some financial models, make sure that it can work. But I think Scott's request, though, is still going to be the same. If in fact we can come to an agreement on a site plan, or close to an agreement on a site plan on December 15th, then Scott would start doing the work that he's got to do, because any work that he was to do now would not be valid if the plan significantly changes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Okay, so I'll take a motion to continue this hearing to December 15th.
Bonnie, it's Don, also move.
Thank you, Don. And do I get a second? Or who do I get it from?
Second
Sorry.
from Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. Right. Calling roll. Alden,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
MJ,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
and Bonnie. Yes. So we'll see you all back on December 15th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate all your time this evening, and sorry to keep you so late. I will see you on December 15th. Thanks.
Okay, this is the work we all need to do, and we're going to do it.
Okay.
Thank
you all. Thank you.
Okay. We have one minor request for, a request for a minor modification on 75 Story Avenue. As Andy said earlier, when I tried to move it forward, it's pretty straightforward and simple. Are you going to present it, Andy?
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to. I think we have James Mitchell here as well.
I'm
as the
sorry.
applicant. Oh, no, that's quite all right. And James,
Whichever one of you wants to.
Yeah, James, jump in here if you'd like. But I think some of you are familiar with the project, obviously. I'm just going to pull up the plan for it, but this was some of the board members here were involved at the time. The CVS project at the corner where Story Avenue meets Low Street. This is the CVS and the gas station here, and the fencing question is
Wait a minute,
actually.
Andy, we can't see it.
Just says your screen sharing. Doesn't have any imagery.
Okay, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. I think some sort of glitch seems to have happened when we gave permission to Joe, because we didn't seem to have this issue before. You're still not seeing it, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what is. I'm going to continue to play around so I can figure what's going on, but
The documents that were submitted.
Yeah. Fine, if everybody wants to pull it up, or if you're familiar with the site, I think Andy can verbally describe it to us.
Yeah, so essentially it's the fence between the medical office building and the CVS. There's a lane that comes in from Low Street between the CVS and the medical office building. And they've asked you, as you can see in the photograph, they've asked to replace that fence. They have some concerns about the painting of it, and Jim can jump in here if you'd like. But the general gist is that they'd like to replace it with a vinyl fence that's lower maintenance. The office comment was essentially in brief that we don't object to the use of vinyl, but we defer to the board on the what is essentially a design change for the fence, only because the top foot detail along that fence, as you can see in the photograph, is not provided in the proposed replacement vinyl fence. So we have no objection at this location to the vinyl fence per se, and understand the context there, but we just question whether or not the board would want that detail also maintained on the fence if it is done in vinyl. But other than that, as you noted, Chair, it's sort of a minor modification to the plan, nothing significant in our opinion.
And Mr. Mitchell, did you want to add to that?
Sure thing. Yeah. So this is James Mitchell for the record. I represent Gianna of Newburyport LLC, the owner of the property, 75 Story Avenue. It's currently the CVS. At any rate, we had tried to preserve the fence and make it last much longer, whereby we had somebody prime it on both sides, paint the fence, and it did not adhere to it, did not bond, and looks absolutely terrible. We got a call from our abutter, actually the tenant that's the abutter, Catherine Thatcher. I provided the email to the board. Basically, they're in agreement that the fence looks terrible today. And rather than wood, we'd want to go with PVC. The white PVC fence is basically indestructible. It doesn't require painting. It doesn't shrivel up and decay. And if you look at actually the Dunkin' Donuts across the street from us, the fence between them and I forget the name of the project is a fence exactly like what we're proposing. It's a privacy fence, white in nature. And, anytime you're dealing with lattice or some kind of detail on top that's ornate with ice and things like that, it can break, or kids will grab it and pull it and snap them, things like that. So we're just trying to make the building and the property look nice and well maintained. So that's really the reason for us making this request. From what I understand, if we had an approval within the last few years, this would be basically a minor modification that we could make at the planning level without coming to the board. But at any rate, we're just doing what we can to follow the rules and regs and want to beautify the property.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay, we're going to have a double motion here. It's a motion to consider the request minor and to approve the request for the minor modification as described. I have a motion.
Bonnie
So
Don
moved,
also
MJ.
move it.
Don, okay, and a second.
I can second it, MJ.
Thank you, MJ. Roll call. Alden,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
MJ,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
and Bonnie, yes. So you are approved and good to go with your fence. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a nice night, everybody.
Thank you. We do not have the minutes for the 10:20 meeting, so we won't be reviewing them tonight. Oh, and I skipped over. I just want to acknowledge the receipt of the correspondence. It's on the website and you can read it. Are there any updates, Andy, that you want to give at this time?
No, I think just the short-term rental units obviously being discussed with the council moving forward. You might, tracking that, where it goes. The Route 1 and traffic circle presentation that's being given by Mass DOT, overlapping with some of this area. I guess the paving work they're doing overlaps this. The lane shifting or anything like that does not overlap the Minko project. But that's taking place on the 10th next week in case you want to attend that. And then obviously the tentative date for the IFS hearing on 12/1, depending on the council's action expected this coming Monday.
And you said that you sent us a link to their discussion of that in a committee meeting on tomorrow night, right?
That's correct. If any of you wanted to attend, I'll be there, but I just wanted to see how their dialogue goes. There was an expectation, I think, that this item would have come out at the last council meeting. That didn't happen. They kept it in committee, general government subcommittee of the council, and it is expected to be discussed there and presumably come back out on the council floor on Monday. My understanding is that the judge had agreed to what is essentially the order of remand back to the board, pending the council's vote, so conditional upon that. So just to kind of expedite the process, and gets to something Bonnie and I talked about, which is just making sure we have enough time to advertise the hearing when they come in to start that process up. So right now, our assumption is that 12/1 would be the date that you would be looking at those materials.
Excuse me. Oh, sorry. You said there was a link that was sent to the meeting for tomorrow?
I had sent the link, I think it was earlier today, early this morning, maybe 2 meetings that were happening. One was today for short-term rental units. The other link was for tomorrow's meeting for the General Government Committee on the IFS settlement agreement.
Okay, I'll look for it. Sorry.
If you don't find it, let me know, but I think I copied all members in that.
Okay, thanks.
Andy, do we have anything on the agenda for our next meeting on the 17th?
No, actually, Diane had indicated that she didn't have an agenda to send to you for that. So I guess I'd sort of defer to you on.
Well, we do. I mean, there's a deadline of a week before, so I guess we should wait until next Wednesday officially to cancel the meeting. But I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that might happen. Doesn't mean everybody goes and takes off early for Thanksgiving, but there's a really good chance that we won't be meeting on the 17th because there won't be anything to discuss. But we more than made up for it tonight. Thank you all for hanging in there and for participating. It was a big question mark for me. I just felt like the best way to get through it all was to go through that list, and I'm glad you hung in there. If I ever choose a way to do something and you think there's a more efficient way to get through, especially on a project like that, so going forward on that one, just jump in and say, hey, I think we could do this a more efficient way, or we ought to focus somewhere else. So I'm always open to help on something as big and complicated as that. So again, we'll have to do our homework before each one of the meetings with them, because clearly we have to focus their thinking in the direction we want it to go. All right. Anything else from anybody?
What, I'm just curious, Bonnie, what's the potential for dialogue with their team between now and December when they would come back?
On the IFS? Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
with
on
this one.
On the residential project.
Our ability to talk to them? What was your question?
I'm just wondering what the potential is for communication, so we don't get all the way to December and they still haven't addressed all of the concerns we expressed tonight.
That's their problem. If it takes them longer to get through the permitting process because they want to stretch it out, that's up to them. But there is this technical review for some aspects of it. They've got everything in writing from Jordy about the landscaping and the work with the rail trail. They've heard from us. This is how the process works. They want to break it down. They obviously want to do the site plan first and make sure that we're all in agreement on that before they do.
Yeah, I mean, they got way down the road with a scheme that is based on a very bad site plan. So.
Well, we gave them, as Rick said, there were the two of us and there were staff there back in September, and they moved ahead with this. We didn't say all the things that everybody said tonight, but we gave them an indication that the site was, shall we just say, overburdened with the design. And I'm glad Rick reminded them and told all of you that, because this is normal, Bob. Get used to it. Sorry. It's frustrating for us.
No, believe me.
But it's their timeline.
Yeah, it's their timeline.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we have more time in a meeting when we don't have a joint public hearing. That put us back an hour. So just imagine it would only be 9:30 now if we hadn't had to do that.
It's just curious what's kind of driving the site plan, because I mean, Arrow Street has been around for a long time. They're a good Cambridge/Boston architectural firm. They should be able to do this. And,
You don't know, we don't know what Lou is saying to them. And
well, that's what I'm getting at is I don't know what they're getting for direction, but they're getting wound around stuff that has gotten them way off track with the site plan direction they ought to be looking at. And they're good architects. They should be
But
able to
listen
solve
to what
this.
Lou said, that all those financials,
I know.
that's what drives it.
I know. There's other ways around that though, other than just packing the site with more units.
Yeah, I agree with Bonnie, though. I think this is an issue that's coming from the developer. It's a function of the number of units. And I think as Rick pointed out, the number of units on the site and the awkward configuration of the site, because the Ashby Cross, that corner parcel is not included here, which was one of the assumptions maybe years ago with this project when it was in concept. Because that parcel is not there, we now have these very unusual corners to the shape. And of course, with a large building, oversized compared to the ordinance baseline, that's creating these problems to a degree. So I don't think it's so much coming from the architect. It's more the program that he's being given to work with.
Yeah.
So Andy, they kept mentioning, or they mentioned that they would be talking to TSAC about the traffic and circulation. The next TSAC meeting is next Thursday. Are they coming to that meeting, or are they going to be coming after or just before we meet with them?
Actually, if I'm not mistaken, TSAC is being moved to the 18th of November due to the holiday. So the expectation is on November 18th, we would hear from anybody at TSAC, anything that hasn't already been commented on or isn't provided before then, we would hear from TSAC their thoughts and concerns as well.
Okay, so I should change the meeting to the 18th rather than the 11th. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't look like Dawn has posted it yet, but she had noted that she was going to move it from the 11th to the 18th.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Yeah. I was going to say, did you want a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I can always depend on you for that one. Right. Okay, we'll take a second from.
I'll second, Alden.
Okay, and the last roll call of the evening. Alden?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
MJ?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Bonnie? Yes. Oh, hi, Linda. Just in time to say goodnight. Okay, everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you.